The uncomfortable truth is that humans did not become different from other animals the moment they first stood upright, shaped to stone, or hunted in groups. Those things matter, but they are not ours alone. Other animals also cooperate, remember, mourn, teach, and solve problems. So the real change may have come later, and in a quieter way, when a human mind began not only to feel fear, hunger, love, or loss, but to notice those feelings as its own, and to wonder what they meant. That may have been the beginning of feeling different. But when did that begin? Before we try to find the moment when humans began to feel different from other animals, we have to be careful with the places where we usually look first. It is tempting to imagine one clear scene in the deep past, a creature standing upright on an open plain, lifting its head above the grass, and suddenly becoming something separate from the rest of life. But the past does not seem to have worked that way. Walking on two legs was important, yet it was not a magical border. A body can change long before the mind fully understands what that change means. Early human ancestors may have moved differently from many other animals, but they were still living close to the ground, close to hunger, close to danger, close to the daily pressure of finding food and staying alive. They did not step out of nature simply because their hands were freer, or their eyes could scan a wider distance. They were still animals among animals, breathing the same air, listening for the same threats, following the same seasons. So if we ask when humans began to feel different, we cannot simply point to upright walking and say, there it is, that is the beginning. The same caution is needed with tools. For a long time, people wanted to believe that tool-making was the great dividing line. A stone held in the hand, a sharp edge shaped from another stone, a branch used to reach food, a bone used to break something open. These seem, at first, like signs of a mind crossing into a new world. And tools did matter deeply in human evolution. They changed what hands could do, what bodies could eat, what groups could attempt, and how much planning might be carried from one moment into the next. But tool use itself is not only human. Other animals use objects in careful ways. Some birds bend twigs or use sticks. Some apes use stones or branches. Some animals learn from watching others. Some even pass habits through a group in ways that look like small traditions. This does not make them human, but it reminds us not to make the human story too simple. If another animal can use a tool without wondering what kind of creature it is, then the first stone tool cannot, by itself, explain the feeling of being different. Hunting together also seems like an obvious answer, but here too the line becomes softer when we look closely. Wolves cooperate, lions coordinate, orcas learn from one another and move with remarkable social intelligence. Chimpanzees form alliances, remember relationships, and respond to status inside their groups. Elephants show signs of memory and social attention that can feel deeply familiar to us. None of this erases the uniqueness of human beings, but it removes the easy answer. Cooperation is older than humanity. Fear is older than humanity. Care for offspring is older than humanity. Memory is older than humanity. Even grief, in some form, may not belong to us alone. The beginning of the human difference, then, may not be found in a single outer behavior. It may not be the first upright step, the first sharpened stone, or the first group hunt. Those things created conditions, and they gave early humans new ways to survive, but they do not automatically prove that a mind had begun to feel separate from the animal world around it. The question is quieter than that. It asks not only what humans did, but what they may have noticed about doing it. It asks when fear became something a mind could hold and recognize, when hunger became more than an urge, when a remembered face could remain present after the person had walked away, when a choice could be felt as a choice. At the beginning of this story, there is no clean border, no sudden doorway, no single bone or stone that can speak for the inner life of a vanished being. There is only a slow narrowing of the question. Humans did not begin to feel different simply because they behaved differently. They may have begun to feel different when behavior, memory, emotion, and attention started to gather together inside a mind that could sense itself living through them. The closer we look at animal life, the harder it becomes to use a single ability as the wall between them and us. Memory, for example, can feel like a deeply human thing because so much of human life is built from it. A person does not only remember where food was found or where danger appeared. A person may remember a voice, a face, a promise, a shame, a place that no longer looks the same, or a dead relative who still seems present in thought. But memory itself is much older than human memory. Birds remember roots and hidden stores. Elephants remember water, paths, and members of their group. Apes remember social bonds and past conflicts. Many animals carry the past forward in their bodies and choices. So when we ask when humans began to feel different from other animals, we cannot say that the answer is simply memory. The question is more precise. It is not whether early humans remembered. It is whether, over a long and uneven stretch of time, they began to know that they were remembering. That difference is difficult to see in bones or stone tools, because a fossil does not tell us how an experience felt from the inside. A skull can suggest the size and shape of a brain. A tool can suggest planning, skill, and learning. A campsite can suggest repeated use, shared work, and group life. But none of these things opens the mind directly. None of them says, this being felt itself to be different. That is why we have to move slowly. We can follow traces of behavior, but we cannot pretend they are direct recordings of thought. The same problem appears with emotion. It is easy to imagine that humans became different when they began to love, fear, grieve, or care for one another. But these feelings did not begin with us. A mother animal protecting her young is not acting like a machine. A frightened herd turning together is not empty of feeling. A social animal searching for a missing companion may be living through something that, at least in outward behavior, resembles distress or loss. This matters because it keeps the human story honest. If we claim every deep feeling as uniquely human, we make the past easier, but less true. Early humans were not minds dropped from the sky into animal bodies. They were living creatures who inherited fear, attachment, hunger, pain, curiosity, and social need from a much older animal history. Their difference, if it slowly appeared, must have grown from those older roots, not replaced them. And that makes the question more moving, not less. It means the beginning of human self-awareness may have been built from ordinary animal experiences that became gradually more layered. Fear could remain fear, but it might also become something anticipated before the danger arrived. Hunger could remain hunger, but it might also become a reason to prepare, to remember, to share, or to worry about tomorrow. Grief could remain the ache of absence, but it might also become a repeated return to a place, an object, a body, or a name. None of this requires us to invent scenes we cannot prove. We do not need to imagine an early human sitting alone and speaking modern thoughts inside the head. We only need to recognize that a mind can become more complex before it becomes fully explainable. The first feeling of being different may not have sounded like an idea. It may not have been a sentence. It may have been a growing tension in daily life. The creature who feared also remembered fear. The creature who chose also watched others choose. The creature who lost someone also carried that loss beyond the moment. In that slow layering, the line between human and other animal did not become sharp. It became strange. And perhaps that strangeness is where the real story begins. If the first mistake is to think humans became different because of one visible behavior, the second mistake is to imagine that the difference must have appeared as a clear thought. A mind does not need to say, "I am human," in order to begin changing. Long before there were written words, long before anyone could leave a sentence behind, there may have been forms of awareness that were quieter than language and harder to name. An early human could feel pain and pull away, like any animal. But perhaps, over time, pain also became something remembered in a more personal way, something connected to a place, a face, a season, or a choice that should not be repeated. An early human could feel fear when a predator moved nearby, but perhaps fear also began to live before the predator appeared. carried in signs, warnings, tracks, silence, and old stories of danger. An early human could feel hunger, but perhaps hunger began to stretch beyond the body into preparation, sharing, hiding food, watching the sky, following the habits of animals, and knowing that tomorrow could be harder than today. This is where the question changes. We are no longer asking only when humans acted differently from other animals. We are asking when experience began to fold back on itself inside the human mind. That kind of change would not leave a simple mark in the ground. A stone tool can show that a hand shaped an edge. A hearth can show that fire was used in a place. A burial, if it is truly deliberate, can suggest that the dead were not treated like ordinary remains. A mark on a wall or a shell can suggest attention to meaning, but none of these traces can tell us exactly what a person felt when they looked at their own hands, their own dead, their own child, their own reflection in water, or the eyes of an animal they had killed. The evidence can bring us close to the doorway, but it cannot let us stand inside the vanished mind. That is why the first part of this journey must remain humble. We can say that human ancestors became increasingly unusual in body, behavior, learning, cooperation, memory, and symbolic possibility. We can say that these changes created a world in which self-awareness may have had more room to grow. But we cannot honestly say that one morning, at one exact place, humans woke up and knew they were different. The beginning was almost certainly slower, more uneven, and more fragile than that. Some groups may have carried certain habits for thousands of years before others did. Some abilities may have appeared, faded, changed, and reappeared. A mind that could plan a hunt was not automatically a mind that asked what kind of being it was. A hand that made a tool was not automatically a hand that wondered about its own place in nature. Yet with each layer, the possibility deepened. A creature that remembers more can compare more. A creature that compares more can notice difference. A creature that lives in a group can learn how it is seen by others. A creature that cares for the injured, watches the dead, teaches the young, and returns to meaningful places may begin to live not only in the world, but also in relation to the world. And that relation may be the quiet beginning of feeling different. Not superior, not separate in a clean or final way. Different in the sense of being able to sense the distance between an action and a thought about that action, between a feeling and the memory of that feeling, between a body moving through life and a mind slowly noticing that life is happening. At the edge of Truk 1, we have not found the answer yet, and we should not pretend that we have. What we have done is remove the easy answers. It was not simply upright walking. It was not simply tools. It was not simply hunting, memory, grief, or cooperation. Those were part of the ground beneath the question, not the whole answer. The deeper question now waits in the body itself. Before humans could think of themselves as different, what kind of body had evolution slowly given them? And how did that body begin to make a different kind of inner life possible? Long before a human mind could ask why it was different, the human body had already begun to live in a different arrangement with the world. This did not happen suddenly, and it did not make our ancestors less animal. It changed the shape of their daily problems. To walk upright was not simply to stand proudly above other creatures, as older stories sometimes imagined. It was to carry the body in a costly and unusual way, balancing the skull, spine, hips, knees, and feet into a form that could move across land, while leaving the hands less tied to walking. This mattered, but not because it instantly created self-awareness. It mattered because it changed what could be seen, carried, held, gathered, touched, shared, and remembered. A creature moving on two legs through open woodland, grassland, forest edges, river margins, and changing climates did not become separate from nature. It became exposed to nature in a new posture. The head was higher, the hands were freer, the body could move with objects, food, infants, stones, sticks, skins, or branches in ways that slowly changed the rhythm of life. And when the rhythm of life changes for long enough, the mind that grows inside that rhythm may also begin to change. We should be careful here, because walking upright alone does not answer the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals. Early bipedal ancestors may not have thought of themselves as different at all. They may have moved, fed, rested, mated, fled, and searched much like other animals, driven by need and danger, but their bodies were beginning to place them in situations where experience could gather in new ways. A free hand can carry food back instead of eating it immediately. A free hand can hold a child while moving. A free hand can pick up a stone and keep it for later. A free hand can touch another body, gesture towards something, pull, offer, warn, or guide. None of these actions requires a modern mind, and none should be exaggerated into a complete inner life. Yet each one adds a small distance between impulse and response. Food does not always have to be eaten where it is found. A useful object does not always have to be left behind. A child does not always have to cling alone. A danger can be pointed toward, a path can be shown, a thing can be brought from one place to another. In such small bodily possibilities, the world becomes less immediate. It begins to stretch. This stretching may be one of the quiet foundations beneath the later feeling of being different. Other animals also carry, gesture, choose, and learn, so again there is no hard wall. But in the human line, upright walking and freed hands became part of a larger pattern. The body was no longer shaped only for moving through the world. It was also increasingly shaped for handling the world while moving through it. That is a subtle difference, but it matters. A hand that can carry a stone for future use invites a mind to connect now with later. A body that can bring food to another invites social memory. A posture that lets the eyes scan distance invites attention beyond the immediate patch of ground. Slowly, the body was making room for a mind that did not live only in the next bite, the next sound, the next threat, though those things remained central. It was making room for a life in which objects, places, companions, and choices could stay connected across time. Perhaps no early ancestor looked at the other animals and thought, "I am not like them." That would be too simple, too modern, and too unprovable. But the body was already preparing the conditions for a different kind of awareness. It taught the mind to live with carried things, repeated places, remembered paths, shared burdens, and delayed needs. Before humans could feel different from animals, their bodies had to give them more chances to notice difference at all. Between near and far, now and later, empty hands and full hands, one place and another, one member of the group and another. The first change was not a declaration. It was a posture, repeated for countless generations, until the world began to arrive through a body that could stand, carry, reach, and slowly make experience wider than the moment. The hand is often treated as if it were only a tool for making things, but in the long story of becoming human, the hand was also a tool for noticing, touching, offering, refusing, pointing, holding, and being recognized by others. A hand could shape stone, but it could also rest on the shoulder of a child. It could lift food toward a mouth, but it could also pass food across the small space between two bodies. It could strike, but it could also calm. It could carry an object from one place to another, but it could also make another member of the group look in the same direction. These may sound like small actions, yet they belong directly to the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals, because a mind does not become aware of itself only by thinking alone. It is also shaped by what the body repeatedly does with others. A creature that can point may begin to share attention. A creature that can offer may begin to live inside expectation. A creature that can hold back a hand instead of reaching at once may begin to feel the space between wanting and choosing. None of this means that early humans were already thinking in the fully reflective way we do now. That would be too much. But it does suggest that the body was giving experience more layers. The face mattered too. Human faces, like the faces of many social animals, could reveal fear, anger, comfort, attention, fatigue, and recognition. Eyes could follow movement, search for danger, watch the hands of others, and hold the gaze of a familiar person. In group life, being seen is not a small thing. A solitary animal may live mostly in relation to weather, hunger, territory, and threat. But a highly social animal also lives in relation to the attention of others. It has to know who is close, different, who is dangerous, who is injured, who has food, who has power, who can be trusted, and who is missing. Early humans inherited this social sensitivity from older animal life, but their bodies and habits may have made it increasingly intense. When hands became more active, faces more watched, gestures more useful, and shared tasks more important, each person's body became part of a field of meaning for the group. A movement of the hand could change another person's attention. A look could warn. A posture could invite or reject. A small delay before acting could be noticed. The body was not only living, it was being read. This matters because feeling different from other animals may have begun partly through being reflected in the responses of other humans. A child who reaches and is stopped, cries and is answered, wanders and is called back, learns in a slow bodily way that its actions are not isolated. The group reacts. The group remembers. The group teaches. Over time, a creature that is constantly watched, corrected, comforted, and guided may come to experience itself not simply as a body moving through the world, but as someone whose movements matter to others. Again, we must not turn this into a sudden modern self. We cannot claim that early humans looked into one another's eyes and understood themselves as persons in the way later cultures would describe, but we can say that the body created repeated situations where self and other became difficult to separate. To feel hunger is one thing. To have another notice your hunger, bring food, refuse food, or take food away is another. To feel fear is one thing. To see fear spread across faces and bodies around you is another. To reach for an object is one thing. To have someone else watch your hand and learn from it is another. In such moments, the body becomes social. The inner life is pulled outward, and the outer world is carried inward. This slow exchange may have helped prepare the human mind for a deeper kind of difference, not because humans left animal life behind, but because their animal bodies became unusually skilled at sharing attention. They looked, touched, carried, followed, imitated, waited, corrected, and responded. A young one did not learn only from the landscape. It learned from hands. It learned from faces. It learned from the nearness or distance of other bodies. It learned that the same object could be wanted by two people, that the same danger could be seen by many, that the same path could be remembered together. And as these shared patterns became part of ordinary survival, the world was no longer only a place of things. It was a place of watched things, handled things, named things in the future, remembered things in the group. Before humans could ask why they were different from other animals, their bodies had already made them live in a world where meaning passed from eye to eye, hand to hand, and generation to generation. A body does not think in words, but it teaches the mind where to place attention. For early humans, the body kept teaching one quiet lesson again and again. Life was not only what happened in the nearest instant. A hand could hold something for later. Feet could return to a place where food had once been found. Eyes could search the distance before danger arrived. A child could be carried through a difficult path instead of being left behind. A useful stone could remain useful after the first strike. A branch, a hide, a bone, a piece of meat, a sleeping place, a familiar face, all of these could begin to connect one moment to another. This does not mean that early humans suddenly understood time in the way we do. They did not need calendars, written plans, or spoken explanations to begin living across a wider span of experience. The body itself made that widening possible. It moved through places that could be remembered. It carried things that could be used again. It depended on companions whose absence or nearness mattered. It learned that what happened now could change what happened later. And in that slow physical education, the mind may have become more prepared to feel that human life was unlike the life of many animals nearby. Not because humans were outside nature, but because their nature was becoming stretched across memory, expectation, and shared attention. Upright walking, free hands, watchful faces, long childhood, and group dependence did not create a complete answer by themselves, but together they formed a different kind of daily world. In that world, the body was always moving between immediate need and delayed result. Hunger still pressed hard, as it does in any animal. Cold still entered the skin. Fear still tightened the muscles. Pain still pulled the body inward. But the same body could also carry food towards someone else, wait near a fire, follow signs from yesterday, watch an elder's hand, guide a child's movement, or keep an object because it might matter later. These repeated acts gave ordinary survival a different texture. The mind did not only react, it began, little by little, to live among traces. A track in mud was not only a mark, it could point toward an animal that had passed. A broken branch was not only broken wood, it could suggest movement, weight, direction, recent presence. A familiar rock shelter was not only stone, it could hold the memory of safety, rain, birth, sickness, or death. A body that lives with such traces is still an animal body, but it is an animal body being trained to connect visible things with invisible meanings. This is important for the central question, because feeling different from other animals may have required this kind of invisible extension. It may have required a life in which the seen world constantly suggested what was not seen. The animal beyond the hill, the storm not yet here, the person who had left, the danger remembered, the tool needed tomorrow, the child who must be taught before the next cold season. Other animals also anticipate, remember, learn, and respond to signs, so we should not pretend that this began only with humans. But in the human line, these abilities gathered around a body especially able to carry, gesture, teach, imitate, and return. The result was not a clean break from animal life. It was a deepening of animal life into something more layered. The body gave the mind more to hold. The group gave the mind more to compare. The landscape gave the mind more to remember. And perhaps, over countless generations, this made one quiet realization more likely, that a life was not only being lived from inside the body, but also watched, shaped, delayed, remembered, and shared. Still, we must not move too fast. A changed body is not the same as a self-aware mind. A free hand is not a philosophy. A wider gaze is not a belief. A carried object is not yet a symbol. What Truk 2 gives us is not the answer, but the ground beneath the answer. It shows that before humans could feel different from other animals, they had to live through a body that made difference noticeable in small repeated ways. They could stand above the grass and still be afraid. They could carry a tool and still be hungry. They could watch one another and still belong fully to the animal world. Yet the form of their bodies kept opening small spaces inside ordinary life, between seeing and reaching, wanting and waiting, finding and carrying, acting and being watched. In those spaces, the later human mind would have room to grow, and once the body had made room for delay, carrying, shared attention, and remembered places, another force could begin to change the story even more slowly. The things humans made, kept, used, and returned to, long before those things became symbols of who they were. A stone tool is easy to see, and for that reason, it is easy to make it carry too much meaning. It sits in the hand, or in the soil, or in a museum case, and it seems to speak for the mind that shaped it. A sharp edge suggests intention. A repeated form suggests learning. A tool found far from the stone it came from suggests movement, memory, and perhaps a reason to carry something before it was needed. These are important clues, but they are still clues. A stone tool does not tell us whether the hand that made it felt separate from the animals nearby. It does not tell us whether its maker wondered about life, death, or the self. It tells us something quieter and more reliable. A body and a mind were beginning to change the immediate world instead of only reacting to it. That is already enough to matter. When an early human ancestor struck stone against stone, the act was not simply about force. It required attention to material, angle, pressure, breakage, and result. It required the maker to notice that one kind of stone broke differently from another, that a useful edge could be produced, that the edge could open hide, cut meat, scrape wood, or change what the body could do. Over time, repeated tool-making meant that experience could become skill, and skill could become something learned by watching. The tool was not only an object, it was a bridge between a past attempt and a future use. This is why tools belong directly to the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals. Not because tools prove a modern human mind, and not because only humans use tools, but because tools slowly made survival depend more on remembered technique. A creature that uses its teeth and claws is living through the body it was born with. A creature that shapes a cutting edge is beginning to add a second body outside the body, a carried ability that can be made, lost, repaired, shared, improved, or taught. Still, we must keep the line soft. Other animals use objects too. A chimpanzee may use a stick to reach termites. A bird may use a twig to pull food from a hidden place. An otter may use a stone to break a shell. These examples remind us that object use belongs to the wider animal world. The human difference was not the first touch between a living creature and a useful thing. The difference was the slow accumulation of that touch into a way of life. In the human line, tools became more regular, more varied, more teachable, and more deeply woven into food, movement, social learning, and memory. A useful object could outlast the moment of need. A technique could outlast the hand that first practiced it. A young one could watch an older hand and carry the pattern forward. This is not yet the same as feeling different from other animals, but it is one of the conditions that made such a feeling more possible. A tool quietly changes the meaning of time. The stone is picked up now, shaped now, carried now, but its full value may belong to later. The hand works in the present for a need that has not yet arrived. That small stretch between present action and future use matters. It gives the mind practice in delay. It gives memory something to hold. It turns the landscape into a place of materials, not only food and danger. One valley may be remembered for water, another for shelter, another for stone that breaks well. A broken edge may bring back the memory of an earlier mistake. A better edge may be copied. A poor stone may be discarded. Slowly, the world becomes layered with usefulness, and the mind moving through that world is no longer only asking, "What is here now?" It may begin, in some non-verbal way, to live with another question. What can this become? That question does not have to be spoken to change a life. It can live in the hands before it lives in words. It can be carried in repeated gestures, in the way a child watches, in the way an elder selects one stone and ignores another, in the way a group returns to the same source of material again and again. If early humans began to feel different from other animals, part of that feeling may have grown from this daily relationship with things that were neither fully natural nor fully imagined. A stone tool began as part of the earth, but after being shaped by a hand, it carried intention in its form. It was still stone, but not only stone. It had been changed by attention. And perhaps, over vast stretches of time, humans living among such changed things began to live among quiet evidence that their own actions could remain in the world after the action ended. The cut marks stayed. The flake scar stayed. The sharpened edge stayed. The object remembered the hand in a way no ordinary branch or pebble did. That was not yet a symbol, not yet art, not yet a statement of human identity, but it was a beginning of another habit, seeing the world as something that could be altered, prepared, carried forward, and returned to. The first tools did not answer the question of human difference. They deepened it. They show us that before humans could think of themselves as different, they were already making differences appear in the material world. One edge, one choice, one repeated gesture at a time. Fire changed the human world in a way that was both physical and inward, but here again we have to move carefully. It would be too simple to say that humans became different from other animals the moment they controlled fire. Fire did not place a clean border between human life and the rest of nature. Lightning made fire before humans did. Animals feared it, avoided it, sometimes benefited from the new growth that followed it, and lived for ages in landscapes shaped by burning. But for humans, or for human ancestors over a long and uneven history, fire slowly became something else. It became a danger that could be approached, a force that could be guarded, a center that could be returned to, and eventually a part of daily life. That shift matters for the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals, because a creature that can stay near fire is living near one of nature's most frightening powers without only fleeing from it. The body still feels heat. The eyes still react to brightness. The skin still knows pain if it comes too close. But the group begins to gather at the edge of danger and keep it alive. In that small circle of warmth, the world changes. Night is no longer only darkness spreading over the land. Cold is no longer accepted in exactly the same way. Meat, roots, and other foods can be changed by heat. Predators may keep more distance. People can remain awake together after the sun has gone, seeing faces in the shifting light, hearing sounds beyond the fire's reach, and feeling both safer and more aware of the darkness around them. This does not mean that fire instantly created storytelling, religion, or modern thought. Those would be large claims, and the evidence cannot support them as simple certainties. But fire did create a setting in which attention could gather. A flame must be watched. Fuel must be added. Embers must be protected. Too little care and the fire dies. Too much carelessness and it harms. A group living with fire learns a different rhythm of responsibility. Someone has to notice when it weakens. Someone has to bring wood or dry grass. Someone has to keep children from coming too close. Someone has to remember where burning material can be found, how it behaves in damp weather, how wind changes it, how ashes hide heat after the bright flame has faded. In this way, fire trains the mind not only to use something, but to maintain something. A stone tool can be placed aside and picked up again. Fire is more demanding. It lives only if the group keeps answering it. That constant attention may have made fire one of the earliest experiences in which humans lived with a shared center that was neither person nor animal, yet changed the behavior of everyone around it. Around fire, the human body also became different in its habits. Hands were warmed and used in low light. Food could be softened. Faces could be seen after dusk. The injured, the very young, and the old might remain closer to warmth. The group could sit in a circle rather than scatter immediately into sleep. Again, we should not imagine modern conversation too quickly. We do not need to picture early humans speaking in complete sentences about who they were, but we can imagine, more cautiously, that a shared fire made the same place matter to several minds at once. It made people return. It made waiting meaningful. It made guarding meaningful. It made the night partly social. And that is important because the feeling of being different from other animals may have grown not only from intelligence, but from repeated surroundings in which humans acted together around something they had learned to preserve. Other animals sleep, gather, watch, warn, and rest near one another, but a firelit group lives in a strange relationship with nature, dependent on it, afraid of it, protected by it, and responsible for it at the same time. That relationship may have deepened the sense that the human world was not only received, but tended. The flame could vanish if neglected. The warmth could be carried as embers. The cooked food could change the body's comfort. The light could reveal a hand, a face, a wound, a tool, a child's expression. In darkness, the world beyond the fire may have seemed full of sounds and unseen movement, but inside the ring of light there was another kind of space, fragile and shared. Perhaps no one thought, we are different from the animals outside. Perhaps the contrast was not yet an idea, but the experience itself may have been powerful. Bodies close together, eyes turned toward the same brightness, hands busy with fuel and food, ears listening beyond the circle, memories of previous nights shaping what should be done now. Fire made the present thicker. It brought danger, warmth, food, memory, group care, and future need into one place. It did not answer the question of human difference, but it gave that question a warmer and darker setting. If tools showed that human hands could leave intention in stone, fire showed that human groups could keep a changing force alive through attention. And in that patient guarding of warmth against darkness, the human mind may have practiced something essential, living not only by instinctive reaction, but by shared responsibility for a world that could be lost if no one remembered to care for it. Planning sounds like a modern word, but the habit behind it is much older than written plans, calendars, maps, or spoken explanations. A creature plans whenever it lets the future change what the body does now. It chooses a stone before the cut is needed. It carries embers before the next cold place. It keeps food long enough to bring it back. It follows a path not because the path feeds the body in that instant, but because memory says something may be waiting beyond the visible ground. In the human story, this habit did not appear fully formed. It likely grew slowly from repeated acts that were practical before they were reflective. Early humans and their ancestors did not need to think of themselves as special in order to prepare. They only needed to learn, through many generations, that some actions mattered after the moment had passed. A stone shaped now could cut later. A fire guarded now could warm later. A child watched now could survive later. A place remembered now could feed the group later. This widening of life across time is one of the quiet bridges between animal awareness and the later human feeling of being different from other animals. Many animals anticipate, store, migrate, build, and respond to seasons, so preparation itself cannot be claimed only for humans. But in the human line, preparation became increasingly tied to tools, teaching, shared memory, and group dependence. It was not just that a body moved toward food. It was that hands made things before the need was complete. Eyes watched others make them. Younger ones learned patterns. Older ones corrected mistakes. And useful habits could remain in a group long after the first person who practiced them was gone. That is a different kind of inheritance. It is not only bone and blood. It is remembered action. A tool-making habit can pass from hand to hand. A way of keeping fire can pass from night to night. A path to stone, water, shelter, or seasonal food can pass from elder to child without being written anywhere. In such a world, the future is not an abstract idea. It is felt in the weight of something carried, in the care given to embers, in the choice to wait, in the decision not to use everything at once. The body is still hungry. The body still wants warmth. The body still fears darkness, injury, teeth, weather, and hunger. But now the body lives under the influence of what is not yet here. This matters deeply for the question of when humans began to feel different, because self-awareness may have needed time before it needed explanation. A mind that only reacts to the immediate world has little space to notice itself, but a mind that waits, remembers, prepares, compares, and teaches begins to live with a second layer of experience. There is what is happening, and there is what may happen. There is what the body wants, and there is what the group needs later. There is the stone in the hand, and there is the animal not yet found. There is the fading fire, and there is the cold before dawn. These small separations do not make a modern self, but they do make room for one. They train attention to move away from the instant and return to it changed. Perhaps this is one reason tools and fire feel so important when we think about human difference. They are visible signs of invisible extensions. A cutting edge extends the hand. A carried ember extends the warmth of one place into another. A practiced skill extends the memory of one person into the hands of another. These extensions do not prove that early humans were wondering about their own nature, but they show that human life was becoming more than immediate reaction. It was becoming a life of stored possibilities, and a creature surrounded by stored possibilities may slowly begin to experience the world differently. The stone is not only stone, it is possible cutting. The ember is not only heat, it is possible morning warmth. The path is not only ground, it is possible return. The child is not only a small body needing care now, it is a future member of the group, a future keeper of habits, a future memory of those who taught. In this way, planning turns ordinary objects and ordinary relationships into quiet carriers of time. The world begins to feel less flat. It has depth. It has traces behind it and possibilities ahead of it. Still, this is not the point where we should say that humans clearly felt different from all other animals. That would close the question too early. What we can say is gentler and more honest. Tools, fire, and preparation gave early humans more reasons to live with delay, and delay gave the mind more chances to notice the distance between desire and action. Wanting food and saving food are not the same experience. Feeling cold and guarding fire for later are not the same experience. Seeing a stone and imagining its future edge are not the same experience. Each small difference may have taught the mind to hold two moments at once. Over long stretches of time, such habits could make human life feel increasingly unusual from the inside, even before anyone had words for unusual. The group that carried tools, guarded fire, taught hands, returned to places, and prepared for needs not yet present was still part of the animal world. It still lived by breath, blood, fear, hunger, birth, injury, and death. But it also lived among things made before they were needed and kept after they had been used. It lived with traces of intention scattered through the camp, near the hearth, beside the path, in the child's memory, and in the practiced movement of the hand. That is where Truck 3 leaves us, not with a final answer, but with a clearer ground beneath the answer. The difference was not the tool alone, not the fire alone, not planning alone. It was the slow way these habits gathered together and taught the human mind to live across time. Once a creature begins to prepare, teach, remember, and return, it also begins to live more deeply inside a group. And in that group, another question waits quietly. Before humans could feel different from animals, did they first have to feel different from one another, recognized, judged, trusted, needed, and remembered by the people around them? To feel different from other animals, humans may first have needed to feel visible to one another. This does not mean that early humans had a clear idea of the self in the way later societies would describe it. It means something simpler and more bodily. A person who lives in a group is never only a body moving alone through hunger, weather, danger, and sleep. That body is watched, it is followed, it is answered, it is sometimes corrected, sometimes ignored, sometimes protected, sometimes feared. In a group, the same action can return to you through the eyes and reactions of others. A child reaches for food and is stopped. A young hunter moves too carelessly and others react. An injured person falls behind, and the group must either slow, help, or leave them. A skilled hand makes a useful tool, and younger eyes begin to watch that hand more closely. A quiet person may still be remembered for where they find water, how they listen in the dark, or how they calm a frightened child. None of this requires written names, formal status, or modern social rules. It only requires repeated living together. And repeated living together changes the meaning of being alive. For many animals, social life is already rich and complex. So again, we must not pretend that recognition began only with humans. Wolves know members of their pack. Elephants respond to familiar companions. Apes remember rank, alliances, kinship, and conflict. Social animals often live inside networks of attention long before the human line becomes distinct. But in early humans, group life may have become increasingly tied to memory, teaching, shared tools, long childhood, carried food, watched hands, guarded fire, and returning places. The group was not just a cluster of bodies, it became a living store of habits. One person remembered a path. Another knew how a stone should break. Another was trusted near children. Another might be dangerous when hungry or angry. Another had survived an old injury and still moved with the group. In such a world, the individual begins to matter in a special way, not as a modern individual, standing apart from the group, but as a remembered presence inside it. This is important for the central question, because feeling different from other animals may have grown partly from feeling that one's actions had a place in the minds of others. To be watched is not the same as merely being seen. To be recognized is not the same as merely being present. A body that is recognized carries a history. Others expect something from it. They know its strength, its weakness, its temper, its skill, its wounds, its habits of sharing or taking, its nearness to certain children, its place beside the fire. Over time, that recognition can shape behavior from the inside. A person may reach for food and hesitate because another is watching. A person may return with something because someone else is waiting. A person may avoid danger not only from fear for the body, but because others depend on that body. These are not abstract thoughts. They are small pressures of social life, yet they create a quiet distance between impulse and action. The hungry hand does not always take. The frightened body does not always flee alone. The angry body does not always strike. The tired body may still carry a child. In these delays, the group enters the self before the self can explain itself. Early humans were still animals, but they were animals whose survival increasingly depended on being known by other animals like themselves. This may sound ordinary, but it is one of the deepest foundations of human difference. A creature that is remembered by others can begin to live with the feeling that its life has a shape beyond the present moment. The group remembers what you did yesterday. The child remembers who fed them. The injured remember who stayed near. The fearful remember who warned them. The young remember whose hands to copy. Even without formal language, even without a clear name, a person can become a pattern in the minds of others. And when that happens, life is no longer only lived from the inside outward. It is also reflected back. Perhaps early humans did not yet ask, "Who am I?" But they may have felt, in repeated and practical ways, that they were not interchangeable. One body could be missed. One hand could be needed. One voice or gesture could calm a child. One absence could change the group's movement. This is not a claim that ancient people had modern self-consciousness at this stage. It is a careful step toward understanding how such self-consciousness could grow. Before humans could feel different from other animals as a species, they may have had to feel different from one another as remembered members of a group. Not better, not separate, not fully named, but distinct enough that attention gathered around them and returned. In that returning attention, the mind received a quiet lesson. What I do does not vanish when the movement ends. It remains in others. It affects their trust, their fear, their care, their memory. And once a creature begins to live with that kind of reflection, the question of difference moves inward. It is no longer only about tools, fire, bodies, or planning. It is about the strange experience of being a living body whose actions are carried in other minds. A group does not need written records to remember people. It remembers through expectation. One person is expected to know where the dry wood can be found after rain. Another is expected to notice tracks before others see them. Another is expected to share, or not share. Another is expected to comfort a child, or to become restless when food is scarce, or to sit close to the injured, or to keep away from conflict. These expectations may not have been spoken in the way we would speak them now, but they could still live in gesture, attention, habit, nearness, distance, and repeated reaction. In this sense, a prehistoric group was not only a gathering of bodies trying to survive, it was also a living memory of what each body had done before. This matters for the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals, because difference is not only felt against the outside world. It can also be felt inside a circle of familiar faces. A person may begin to sense, slowly and without clear words, that others respond to them in a particular way. The child who is often protected feels one kind of place in the group. The strong adult who is often followed feels another. The old person who no longer moves quickly but remembers paths, seasons, or useful plants may still hold a place that is not measured by strength alone. The injured person who survives because others wait or help may feel the group around them not as scenery, but as a force that has chosen, at least for that moment, to keep them inside life. We should be careful not to make this too modern. There is no need to imagine formal titles, chiefs, moral speeches, or clear ideas about personal identity. What matters is more basic. In a small group, repeated behavior becomes known. Known behavior becomes expectation. Expectation becomes pressure. Pressure becomes part of inner life. A hungry person may know from many past reactions that taking too much will change how others come near. A careless person may sense that others watch them differently. Someone skilled may feel eyes turning toward their hands when a task begins. Someone trusted with children may feel a different kind of patience growing around them. These are simple things, but they draw a creature into awareness of how it exists for others. And once a creature begins to live inside the memory of others, its own actions become less isolated. They have an afterlife. They remain after the hand has stopped moving, after the food has been eaten, after the danger has passed, after the anger has faded. A group can remember generosity. It can remember betrayal. It can remember courage, fear, clumsiness, knowledge, tenderness, and danger. Many social animals also remember such things in their own ways, and that truth must stay with us. Human social life did not rise from empty ground. It grew from older animal bonds, kin care, alliance, dominance, attachment, warning, imitation, and shared attention. But in early humans, these older bonds may have been gradually deepened by long childhood, tool learning, food sharing, fire keeping, and the need to pass habits across time. A young human could not survive alone. A wounded adult might continue living if others cared enough to slow down or share. An elder whose body weakened might still carry knowledge that mattered to the group. These conditions could make the value of a person less immediate than the strength of a limb or the sharpness of teeth. A person could matter because of what they remembered, what they knew, who they calmed, what they had taught, or how they held the group together in quiet ways. This is one of the places where the human story begins to feel different, without leaving the animal world behind. The group made invisible qualities more important. Skill is partly invisible until the hand performs it. Trust is invisible until danger tests it. Memory is invisible until the path must be found again. Care is invisible until someone weak needs help. Patience is invisible until hunger makes everyone restless. A group that depends on such invisible qualities teaches its members to notice more than body size, speed, and force. It teaches them to notice patterns inside one another, and as those patterns are noticed, a person can become more than a body among bodies. They become someone whose past matters. The feeling of being different from other animals may have been prepared by this very ordinary social fact. Humans increasingly lived in groups where the past of each member could shape the future of all. If a skilled maker disappeared, the group lost more than muscle. If a careful watcher died, the group lost more than one pair of eyes. If a patient caregiver was absent, a child's safety might change. If an older person with seasonal knowledge was left behind, a path, a food source, or a warning might be lost with them. In such a world, each person could begin to carry a kind of unseen weight, not importance in the modern proud sense, but weight in the survival sense. Others had reasons to notice them. Others had reasons to remember. Others had reasons to respond differently to one person than another. This could slowly create a sense of personal place, even before there were clear stories about the self. A person who is repeatedly needed may feel the pull of being needed. A person who is repeatedly corrected may feel the pressure of being known for mistakes. A person who is repeatedly comforted may feel the group as a shelter. A person who is repeatedly distrusted may feel distance before anyone explains it. These feelings would have been close to the body. A pause, a look, a tightening, a movement toward the fire or away from it, a hand reaching out or held back. Yet over time, such bodily knowledge could become part of the inner world. To live in a group is to learn that one's life is not only one's own movement, it is entangled with the memory, fear, need, and hope of others, and that may have been one of the quiet steps toward human self-awareness. Not a sudden discovery, not a clear declaration, but a slow social education. I am seen differently from another. My actions return to me. My absence matters. My presence changes what others do. At this point, we still have not answered when humans first felt different from other animals, but we are closer to understanding the kind of world in which such a feeling could grow. It was not only a world of stone, fire, hunger, and weather. It was a world of remembered people. And in a world of remembered people, the self may have begun as something reflected, long before it was something spoken. A person who lives alone can be hurt by the world, helped by the world, or forced to follow the world. But a person who lives inside a group is also shaped by being remembered. This may be one of the quietest and most important steps in the long movement toward human self-awareness. The body acts, and then the action returns through others. A hand shares food, and later another body comes nearer. A hand takes too much, and later others watch more closely. A person stays with the injured, and trust gathers around them. A person brings danger through carelessness, and distance gathers instead. These reactions may be small, but small reactions repeated over many seasons can teach a mind that its movements do not vanish when they are finished. They leave traces in other people. This is not yet a modern idea of reputation, and it is not yet a spoken identity. It is something older and more physical. It is the feeling of being expected, the feeling of being watched, the feeling of being needed, the feeling of being avoided, the feeling of being called back into the circle by the reactions of familiar bodies. For the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals, this matters because the self may not have begun as a private thought hidden inside the skull. It may have begun partly as a social echo. A child learns its own place through the hands that lift it, stop it, feed it, guide it, and pull it away from danger. A young person learns the weight of action through the reactions that follow clumsiness, success, fear, anger, or generosity. An adult learns that the body is not only a body, it is a known body. It has a past in the group. It has a pattern. It can be trusted with some things and not others. It can be missed if it disappears. It can be blamed if harm follows. It can be sought out when a certain skill is needed. Many social animals also live with recognition, rank, attachment, and memory. So this was not a clean human invention. But in the human line, the growing weight of tools, fire, long childhood, teaching, care, and shared knowledge made social memory unusually deep. A group could remember not only who was strong or dominant, but who knew where to find something, who could shape something, who stayed calm, who watched carefully, who could teach, who had lost someone, who had survived sickness, who was slow but wise in certain seasons. In that kind of group, a person's value could become less tied to immediate physical power and more tied to history. And history is one of the places where selfhood can grow. When others remember you, they hold a version of you that lasts beyond the present moment. They may not hold it in words, but they hold it in how they approach, wait, trust, warn, follow, or turn away. Slowly, the living person meets these reflections. They feel the nearness or distance of others before any explanation is given. They feel the change in the group after they act. They feel the difference between being included and being pushed outward, between being copied and being ignored, between being needed and being only present. Such feelings could have made early human life more inward without making it abstract. The mind did not have to say, "I have an identity." It only had to feel the pressure of being remembered differently from another person. A creature that feels this pressure begins to live in more than one place at once. It lives in its own hunger, but also in the hunger of those who expect it to share. It lives in its own fear, but also in the fear it sees spreading across familiar faces. It lives in its own skill, but also in the eyes that watch and learn from that skill. It lives in its own wounds, but also in the care or impatience those wounds bring from others. This is a deeper kind of social life, because the group is not only outside the person, the group becomes part of how the person feels before acting. The group enters the pause before the hand reaches, the hesitation before the body leaves, the patience before anger, the decision to carry something back instead of eating alone. Here the question of human difference becomes more precise. It is not that humans suddenly stopped being animals. It is that some animals in the human line began to live with a growing awareness of how they existed in the minds of others. They were still bodies of blood, bone, breath, fear, hunger, and warmth. But they were also remembered bodies, and a remembered body can slowly become a self. This does not mean that early humans felt superior to the animals around them. That is a much later and more dangerous idea. The first difference may have been humbler. It may have been the strange feeling that one's own life had a shape that others could recognize, a way of walking, a way of helping, a way of taking, a way of knowing, a way of being missed. Perhaps this is why the path toward feeling different from other animals must pass through the group. Alone, a creature can feel pain. In a group, it can feel that its pain matters or does not matter to others. Alone, a creature can want food. In a group, it can learn that taking food changes trust. Alone, a creature can die. In a group, its absence can change the pattern of the living. The self, then, may have grown not as a sudden light inside one skull, but as a slow web of remembered relations between many skulls, many hands, many faces, many shared dangers. At the close of this part of the journey, we still do not have one moment we can point to and say, here, humans knew they were different. But we can see that the question has moved again. It began with bodies, tools, and fire. It has now entered the circle of familiar people. A human being may have begun to feel different not by looking first at an animal and thinking, I am not that, but by living among others who made the person feel known, expected, and changed by memory. And once the group could reflect a person back to themselves, another layer of the story was ready to open. The layer of emotion, where fear, hunger, pain, tenderness, and loss were no longer only private reactions of the body, but experiences that could be seen, shared, answered, and carried by others. Fear is one of the oldest teachers in the animal world. Long before humans appeared, bodies had already learned to tighten, flee, freeze, hide, strike, call out, or gather close when danger came near. Fear did not begin with us, and it would be false to treat fear as a human invention. A deer lifts its head at a sound. Birds rise together before a threat is fully seen. A troop of primates becomes alert when one member notices something wrong. A herd shifts because fear has moved through it faster than thought. Early humans inherited this ancient language of the body. Their hearts would have quickened. Their muscles would have prepared. Their eyes would have searched the grass, the trees, the dark edge of a shelter, the place where a sound had come from. In that sense, their fear was animal fear, old fear, useful fear, fear shaped by survival. But the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals does not ask whether humans felt fear. It asks whether fear slowly became something more than a private alarm inside the body. It asks when fear could be noticed, shared, remembered, taught, and perhaps carried forward as knowledge. A frightened animal may run because danger is present. A human group, over time, could begin to live with fear even before danger arrived, because signs had been learned and memories had been kept. A broken branch, a silence among birds, the smell of a predator, the direction of tracks, the sudden stillness of another person's body, these could make fear move through the group before the threat was visible. And when fear can be passed from one body to another, through attention, gesture, sound, and memory, it becomes part of a social world. It is no longer only the body saying, survive. It is also the group saying, remember. This matters deeply for the central question, because one quiet step toward human difference may have been the moment emotion became shared information. A person who is afraid can alert others. A child can learn what to fear by watching an older face. A group can remember where fear once saved them or where ignoring fear led to harm. The feeling still begins in the body, but it no longer ends there. It travels. It becomes a warning. It becomes a habit. It becomes caution around a place, a sound, a season, a kind of animal, a kind of weather, a kind of silence. Other animals also warn, learn fear socially, and respond to the fear of companions, so we must again avoid drawing a hard line too early. But in early humans, fear may have become increasingly tied to tools, fire, teaching, long childhood, and remembered places. A dangerous valley was not only dangerous while the predator stood there, it could remain dangerous in memory. A night sound was not only a sound, it could wake an old fear. A scar was not only healed skin, it could remind others of what happened. A child's mistake was not only a moment of danger, it could become a lesson repeated in gesture, movement, avoidance, and later perhaps words. In this way, fear helped stretch the mind across time. The body felt now, but the mind carried before and after. That stretching may have been one of the foundations of feeling different, not because humans had fear, but because human fear could become something watched from the side, something shaped, controlled, delayed, or answered. A person might feel fear and still hold still, because running would expose the group. A person might feel fear and still reach for a child. A person might feel fear and still feed the fire, grip a stone, listen, wait, or warn. In that pause between fear and action, a mind begins to have room. It does not escape fear. It stands inside fear and does something with it. This is not a dramatic, heroic scene. It may have happened in small, repeated moments. A hand placed over a child's mouth to keep them quiet. A group lowering their bodies in the grass. Someone signaling without sound. Someone refusing to enter a place remembered as dangerous. Someone staying close to an injured person when every instinct urged movement away. Each of these moments would have been practical first. Survival came before meaning, but over long generations, practical habits can teach the mind new forms of attention. Fear becomes not only what happens to me, it becomes what happens to us. It becomes what others can see in me and what I can see in them. It becomes something that can be hidden, controlled, answered, or remembered. And when an animal mind begins to notice its own fear in relation to the fear of others, something subtle changes. The feeling is still old, still bodily, still rooted in the same deep systems that protect many living creatures, yet it has become more layered. The frightened person is not only afraid, they may also sense that others are afraid, that others are watching their fear, that the group's next movement depends on what each body does with that fear. Here again, there is no clean boundary where humans step outside animal life. There is only an ancient emotion becoming thicker inside a social, remembering, tool-using, fire-keeping group. If humans began to feel different from other animals, fear may have been one of the first feelings through which that difference was practiced. Not because fear made them special, but because fear, shared and remembered, taught them that an inner state could move outward, affect others, return through others, and become part of a common world. Hunger is another ancient feeling that does not belong to humans alone. Every animal body must answer it. Hunger pushes a creature outward into the world, toward roots, fruit, meat, insects, seeds, water, milk, blood, or whatever the body can use to keep living. It narrows attention. It makes the present stronger. It can make patience thinner, danger easier to accept, and other bodies seem like rivals. Early humans knew hunger in this old animal way. Their bodies would have weakened when food was scarce. Their thoughts, if we can use that word carefully, would have turned toward where food might be found. Who had eaten, who had not, what could be carried, what could be cut, what could be cooked, what could be saved. But the human question begins, where hunger stops being only a private command. A hungry person can eat at once, if food is there. Yet in a group, hunger becomes more complicated. A piece of meat may be wanted by the one who found it, but also by a child, an injured adult, a nursing mother, an old person whose knowledge still matters. or a companion who may later help in return. The body says now, the group says not only now. This small conflict belongs directly to the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals, because the feeling of being human may have grown partly from living with needs that could not always be satisfied alone or immediately. Other social animals share food, feed young, compete, beg, steal, and cooperate in many ways, so again there is no clean wall between them and us. But in early human life, food became tied to carrying, cutting, cooking, waiting, dividing, remembering, and teaching. Hunger could be answered by the hand, but it could also be delayed by the hand. A person could hold food and not eat it. A person could bring food back to others. A person could watch who received more, who received less, who refused, who gave, who hid, who returned empty-handed, who made sure the young survived. These acts are not abstract morality yet. They are practical social life. But practical social life can slowly train the mind to feel the difference between desire and responsibility. Pain may have taught a similar lesson. Pain is deeply bodily, and it is older than human thought. A wound, a burn, a broken bone, a fever, a difficult birth, a torn foot after a long walk, these were not ideas. They were suffering in flesh. But in a group, pain could become visible to others. Someone limped, and others saw the change. Someone could not gather food, and others had to respond. Someone cried out, withdrew, trembled, bled, or stopped moving with the usual strength. The group could ignore, abandon, help, wait, feed, carry, clean a wound, keep a fire close, or protect the weak for a time. We must not turn this into a sentimental picture where all early humans were always gentle. Life was hard, and groups under pressure may have made harsh choices. Yet the evidence of long human dependence, long childhood, social learning, and survival through cooperation makes care an important part of the story. Care does not make humans separate from all animals, because many animals care for offspring, companions, and kin. But human care may have become unusually extended, remembered, and socially meaningful. To be hungry and be fed by another is one experience. To be hurt and have others slow down is another. To be weak and still remain inside the group is another. These moments could teach a mind that its suffering did not always end at the skin. It could enter the attention of others. It could change their actions. It could make them come nearer or move away. Tenderness, then, may not have begun as a noble idea. It may have begun as warmth, milk, food passed across a fire, a hand steadying a smaller body, someone waiting for a slower step, someone watching through the night because another body was not well. Such tenderness would still be animal tenderness, rooted in attachment and survival. But as it became tied to memory, expectation, and shared life, it may have helped early humans feel that inner states could be answered from outside. Hunger could be seen. Pain could be noticed. Weakness could matter. Need could call another person close. And when a creature learns that what happens inside its body can be recognized and answered by others, its inner life becomes less alone. That may have been one of the quiet beginnings of human difference. Not a grand idea of superiority, but the slow discovery that fear, hunger, pain, and need could move between bodies, become responsibility, and return as care. Loss may be the feeling that brings us closest to the edge of the question, because loss is where an animal body meets absence. A companion was near, and then is not near. A child cried, and then the sound is gone. A familiar body moved with the group for many seasons, and then it no longer rises. This kind of experience is not only human. Many social animals respond strongly when a member of their group disappears, weakens, or dies. Some remain near the body, and nothing that. Some search, some show distress, some change their behavior around the place where the absence began. We should not claim that these animals understand death as humans later came to understand it, but neither should we pretend that they feel nothing. The human story becomes more honest when we remember that grief, attachment, and separation have deep roots in animal life. Early humans did not invent the pain of absence. They inherited the capacity to bond, to depend, to recognize, to search, to feel distress when a familiar presence was broken. But in the human line, loss may have slowly become more layered because the missing person did not vanish from memory as quickly as the body vanished from sight. A person who had shared food, carried a child, shaped tools, warned others, remembered paths, or sat near the fire could remain present in many small ways after they were gone. Their absence could be felt in the task they no longer did, the place they no longer occupied, the hand that no longer reached, the voice or gesture that no longer answered. This matters for the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals, because loss may have taught the mind that something could be gone and still remain. The body was absent, but the memory stayed. The place was empty, but the expectation remained. The hand no longer moved, but others still knew what that hand used to do. In that strange space between absence and memory, human inner life may have deepened. A group could continue to live, but the shape of the group had changed. Someone might reach for a familiar helper and find no one there. A child might look toward the person who once fed them. An older member might notice that a certain path was no longer remembered by the one who knew it best. These are not proofs of ritual belief or abstract thought. They are smaller and more careful than that. They are the ordinary facts of social memory after loss. Yet ordinary facts can become powerful when repeated across generations. If humans began to feel different from other animals, perhaps part of that difference grew from carrying the absent inside the living. Fear could be shared while danger was near. Hunger could be answered while food was present. Pain could be seen while the wounded body remained. But loss continued after the event. It could return at night, at a familiar place, beside a fire, during a season, in the face of a child who resembled someone gone. A mind that carries loss is living in more than the visible world. It is living with a presence that has no body. Other animals may also remember and search, so again we do not make a hard wall. But in early humans, as memory, group life, care, tools, fire, and teaching gathered together, absence could become part of shared life. The dead or missing person may have remained in habits, the way someone else copied their hand, the way the group avoided a place where danger had taken them, the way a child was cared for by another, the way a tool lay unused because the person who made it was gone. Loss turns memory into something almost physical. It changes where people sit. It changes who carries what. It changes who teaches. It changes who is protected. It changes the silence around a group. And when a feeling changes the behavior of many people after the cause is no longer visible, that feeling has become more than a private reaction. It has become part of a world the group shares. This may be one of the deepest steps toward the later human sense of difference. Not simply knowing fear, hunger, pain, or affection, but knowing that what is no longer here can still matter. In that knowledge, the mind begins to hold an invisible layer of life. It remembers the absent. It anticipates future absence. It may become more careful with the living because it has known what it is to lose them. Still, we should not close the question too soon. We cannot say exactly when early humans first understood death as final, or when grief became tied to belief, or when absence became memory, in the way we would recognize today. The evidence does not let us enter that vanished silence directly. What we can say is that emotions in human life became increasingly social, remembered, and carried across time. Fear warned the group. Hunger tested sharing. Pain called for care. Loss left a space that memory kept touching. Together, these feelings may have trained the human mind to notice its own inner weather, not as something sealed inside one body, but as something moving between bodies and remaining after events passed. At the end of this part, we are closer to the next doorway. Once a group can feel the absence of a person, once it can remember a body that no longer moves, the question becomes heavier and more delicate. What did early humans do when the body itself remained, but the person seemed gone? Did they simply leave it, avoid it, protect it, cover it, return to it, or begin, in ways we must describe carefully, to treat it as something more than ordinary matter. That is where the next part of the journey must go, toward death, not as a dramatic mystery, but as one of the oldest and quietest mirrors in which humans may have begun to notice the difference between a living body and a remembered life. A dead body creates a question that no living group can avoid, even if it has no words for the question. A moment earlier, there was warmth, breath, movement, hunger, fear, recognition, and response. Then something changes. The body remains, but the person who answered, reached, watched, carried, warned, fed, slept, or suffered no longer answers. For early humans, this must have been one of the most difficult experiences to live through, not because they necessarily had beliefs like later religions, and not because we can safely imagine what they thought, but because the contrast itself was unavoidable. A living body and a dead body are not the same kind of presence. The eyes do not follow. The hand does not close. The chest does not rise. The familiar pattern that others had learned to expect is suddenly broken. This matters for the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals, because death may have forced the mind to notice something that ordinary life could hide. The difference between the body as matter and the body as someone. Other animals also respond to death and dying in serious ways. Some remain close to dead companions, some inspect the body, some show agitation, silence, searching, or changes in social behavior. So, we should not say that only humans ever notice death. That would be too simple and not honest enough. But in the human line, where social memory, care, tool use, fire, teaching, and long dependence had already made individuals matter in more layered ways, a dead body may have carried a heavier meaning. It was not only a biological fact, it was the place where a remembered life and a physical body separated in front of the living. A person could still be remembered, but the body no longer acted like the person. That gap may have been one of the earliest mirrors of human difference. We have to speak carefully here, because archaeology cannot read grief directly. A skeleton can show position, age, injury, disease, treatment after death, or sometimes, whether a body seems to have been placed deliberately, it can sometimes show that a person survived severe injury for a time, which may suggest care from others. It can sometimes show burial, repeated use of a place, or objects near remains, but none of these signs automatically proves what people believed. A body placed in the ground does not always mean belief in an afterlife. An object near a body does not always mean ritual. A careful position does not always mean the same meaning in every group or period. The honest path is narrower. Certain traces may suggest that some early humans did not always treat the dead as ordinary debris. They sometimes seem to have stayed near, placed, protected, returned to, or responded to bodies in ways that hint at relationship and memory. That is enough to matter without turning uncertainty into certainty. Imagine, cautiously, the practical problem first. A body that no longer lives still affects the living. It may attract predators. It may carry smell. It may need to be moved from a shelter, covered, avoided, or placed somewhere else. In a hard environment, practical reasons can explain many actions, but practical action does not remove emotional meaning. The same hands that move a body because it must be moved may also know whose body it is. The same group that protects itself from danger may also feel the weight of absence. A dead stranger, a dead child, a dead companion, and a dead elder would not have been the same experience. The body in front of them had a history in the group. It had been fed, feared for, trusted, watched, helped, resisted, loved, or needed. When that body became still, the living were not only solving a problem, they were facing the end of a pattern that had lived among them. In this way, death joins the central question very directly. Humans may have begun to feel different not when they first saw death, but when they could hold both sides of it at once. This is the body, and yet the one we knew is no longer here. That is a difficult kind of awareness. It does not require philosophy. It does not require a clear doctrine of spirit or soul. It may begin as confusion, searching, refusal, quietness, touching, returning, waiting, or the strange habit of expecting movement from what no longer moves. A child may look for the person who is gone. An adult may avoid the place for a while. Someone may keep near the body longer than practical need demands. Someone may remember a skill that died with that person. Someone may copy their way of shaping a tool or calming a child. The dead body becomes a boundary between visible and invisible life. The flesh is visible. The memory is invisible. The absence is invisible. But it changes everything. This may be why death belongs so deeply to the story of human self-awareness. It teaches the living that a person is more than the moving body, even if they do not yet know how to explain what that means. It teaches that something can be present in memory and absent in touch. It teaches that a life can leave a shape after breath is gone, and once a mind begins to live with that kind of difference, it may also begin to turn the question back toward itself. If that body can become still while the remembered person remains in us, what are we while we are alive? Are we only warmth and hunger and movement, or are we also the pattern others carry after we leave? Early humans may not have asked this in words. We should not place modern sentences into ancient minds. But the situation itself was there, waiting in every death. The dead did not answer. The living had to respond. And clues. And in that response, whether practical, emotional, cautious, or eventually symbolic, the human mind may have come a little closer to noticing that life was not only a body moving through the world. It was also a relationship, a memory, and a presence that could remain after the body no longer moved. The living have always had to decide what to do with the dead, but in the deep past, that decision did not need to begin as a belief. It could begin as nearness, danger, smell, weather, memory, fear, care, or the simple fact that a body could not remain in the same way among the living. A dead body inside a shelter changes the shelter. A dead body near a path changes the path. A dead body left open may draw animals. A dead body belonging to someone known changes the silence around the group. So when we think about early humans placing, covering, moving, or returning to the dead, we must hold two truths at the same time. The first is practical. Bodies create problems the living must solve. The second is emotional and social. The body is not just any object, because the group remembers who it was. This careful double vision is important for the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals. If we turn every ancient burial into proof of religion, we go too far. If we reduce every treatment of the dead to hygiene or avoidance, we also go too far. The more honest path is to stay with the tension itself. A body may be moved because it must be moved, but the way it is moved may still carry attention. A body may be covered because the living needs safety, but covering may also soften the sight of someone no longer alive. A place may be avoided because it is dangerous, but avoidance may also become memory. A group may return to a place because it is useful, but returning may also bring the dead back into awareness. In this way, practical action and inner meaning do not have to be enemies. They can grow together, quietly, before anyone has a fixed explanation for what they are doing. Archaeology sometimes gives us signs that bodies were deliberately placed, or that the dead were not always treated as ordinary remains, but these signs must be handled with patience. A skeleton lying in a certain position might mean care, but it might also be shaped by soil, collapse, animal disturbance, water, time, or later processes. Objects near remains might have been placed there, or they might have entered the same layer for other reasons. A repeated burial place might suggest memory, but it does not automatically tell us what the people believed about death. This is why a truthful story should not speak as if we can hear ancient thoughts clearly. We cannot. We can only say that, in some places and times, human groups seem to have responded to the dead in ways that suggest more than indifference. They may have protected bodies from scavengers. They may have placed them away from living spaces. They may have returned to places where the dead lay. They may have treated certain bodies with attention because those bodies still belong to someone remembered by the group. These possibilities matter because they show a mind learning to live with absence in a material form. The dead person is gone, but the body remains. The body is here, but the familiar response is gone. The living must act towards something that is both known and changed. That may be one of the deepest emotional lessons any mind can face. Other animals also show attention to dead companions, and this should remain part of the story. Elephants, apes, dolphins, and some other social animals have been observed responding to death or dying in ways that suggest recognition, investigation, distress, or altered behavior. This does not mean their inner experience is the same as ours, but it warns us not to claim too much for humans alone. The human difference, if it grew here, may have grown through accumulation. Longer memory, more dependent children, more complex tools, shared fire, repeated places, and stronger traditions of care. A dead body in such a group could affect many layers of life at once. It could change who slept where. It could change who carried food. It could leave a child needing another caregiver. It could remove a maker of tools, a knower of paths, a calming presence, a dangerous presence, or an old memory of seasons. The body on the ground was not only the end of breath, it was a tear in the web of expectations. And when the living responded, they were not responding only to matter. They were responding to the break in relation. Perhaps this is why the handling of the dead feels so close to the beginning of human difference. It is not because burial automatically means belief. It is because any repeated, careful response to death suggests that the living could hold a person in mind after the body had stopped behaving like a person. They could act toward absence. They could give shape to loss. They could make a place for what could no longer move with them. That place might be a shallow covering, a protected hollow, a return to a remembered spot, a pause beside remains, a refusal to leave the body exposed, or only a change in the way the group moved afterward. We should not decorate this with certainty. We should let it remain spare and quiet. The important point is that death forced early humans to face the difference between a living companion and a silent form that still looked familiar. In that difference, the mind could begin to sense that life was not simply flesh. It was movement, response, memory, relation, expectation, and shared time. When those vanished from the body became strange. It was still loved or feared or known, but it no longer answered. To live with that strangeness is to live near the edge of reflection. It may have made early humans more aware of others, but also, slowly, more aware of themselves. Every living body around the fire could become such a body one day. Every familiar face could vanish into memory. Every hand that shaped a tool could become still. This awareness may not have been clear, and it may not have been constant. It may have come and gone like cold air entering a shelter. But once death is remembered, life is seen differently. The living are no longer only living. They are beings who can be lost, missed, carried in memory, and perhaps treated with care even after breath ends. That is not an answer to when humans first felt different from other animals, but it is a powerful step toward the answer. It shows that the human mind was learning to respond not only to what acts, moves, and needs, but also to what no longer acts and still matters. If death made early humans notice the difference between a living body and a body that no longer answered, it may also have turned the question back toward the living themselves. This is one of the most delicate parts of the story, because we cannot know exactly what a vanished mind understood about its own future death. We should not imagine an early human sitting in a modern way, thinking clearly about mortality, identity, and meaning. That would be too much. But we also do not need to go that far. A quieter possibility is enough. When a group sees one familiar body become still, and then another across seasons and generations, the living may begin to feel that death is not only something that happened to that one person, it belongs to the pattern of life itself. The hand that now carries food can one day become still. The face now watched by a child can one day no longer answer. The person who remembers paths can one day become the person remembered by others. This kind of awareness may have been dim, uneven, and wordless at first, but even a dim awareness can change how life feels. A creature that only reacts to danger avoids death in the moment. A creature that remembers the dead may begin to live with the knowledge that life can vanish even when danger is no longer visible. That knowledge does not have to be spoken to deepen the inner world. It can live in the way someone stays near a child after losing another. It can live in caution around a place where someone died. It can live in a pause before leaving an injured person behind. It can live in the strange quiet around a body that still looks familiar but no longer belongs to ordinary action. This matters for the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals, because self-awareness may have grown partly from seeing others as lives that could end, and then slowly sensing oneself as the same kind of life, not separate from animals, not above nature, but exposed to nature in a newly remembered way. Other animals may grieve, search, remain near the dead, or respond to absence, so we should not claim that humans alone ever felt the weight of loss. But in the human line, death entered a world already shaped by tools, fire, long childhood, teaching, group memory, shared food, and remembered places. Because of that, the death of one person could reach far beyond the moment. It could change who knew how to make something, who protected someone, who carried a memory, who was trusted in danger, who sat beside the fire, who taught the young, who had been expected to return. A death could remove a body, but also remove knowledge, skill, comfort, warning, and history. The group did not lose only flesh. It lost a pattern of relation, and when a living person understands, even without words, that others can become absent in this way, the living person may also begin to feel that their own life has a shape that could one day remain only in others. This is not a full doctrine of the soul. It is not proof of religion. It is not even necessarily a clear thought about an afterlife. It is a more grounded awareness. What I do can remain. Who I am to others can be remembered. My body can disappear from action while my traces stay in the group. The tool shaped by a dead hand may remain. The path taught by a dead elder may remain. The child fed by a dead mother may remain. The scar left by an old danger may remain. The place where someone died may remain heavy in memory. These remaining things may have taught the living that life leaves marks. And if life leaves marks, then perhaps a living person is not only a passing body, but a source of marks, memories, habits, and changes in others. Here the feeling of difference becomes very quiet and very deep. Humans may have begun to feel different not because they believed they were outside the animal world, but because they increasingly lived with the strange fact that they could think and act toward the absent. They could respond to someone no longer moving. They could be changed by someone no longer present. They could carry a dead person's way of doing something in their own hands. They could become careful because of a loss that had already happened. They could fear a future absence before it arrived. In this way, death stretched the mind in both directions. It pulled memory backward toward those who were gone, and it pushed awareness forward toward the possibility of losing others, and perhaps of being lost oneself. The present became thinner, because the living were surrounded by what had ended, and what would one day end. This is one reason death may have become one of the oldest mirrors of human self-awareness. In the still body of another, the living could see not an idea, but a possibility. The possibility that warmth can leave, the possibility that response can stop, the possibility that a known person can become a remembered person, the possibility that oneself too is a body that others may one day gather around, move away from, cover, search for, or remember. Such awareness, if it emerged gradually, would not have made early humans less animal. It may have made them more aware of what being an animal means. To live in a body that needs food, warmth, care, and breath, and to know, however faintly, that the body is temporary. At the close of this part of the journey, we still have no single date, no single burial, no single skeleton that can answer the question for us. We have only a careful path through what death may have required of the living. The dead body forced attention. The remembered person forced absence to remain. The group's response forced practical care and emotional meaning to touch. And the living, seeing that a person could be gone and still matter, may have come closer to feeling that human life was something carried not only inside one body, but across bodies, memories, places, and time. From here, the story can move toward another kind of trace. Not the body left behind after life, but the mark left behind by attention itself, scratches, pigments, shells, signs, and shapes that may show how humans began to place meaning outside the body into the world where others could see it. A mark on stone is a small thing, but it changes the silence of the world. Before the mark, the surface was only rock, shell, bone, ochre, clay, or a wall touched by weather and time. After the mark, something has passed through attention and remained there. A line, a groove, a patch of colour, a repeated cut, a shaped shell, a smoothed object, a pattern that does not seem needed for cutting, carrying, eating, or staying warm. These are the kinds of traces that make us lean closer to the question of human difference. But they also ask for caution. Not every scratch is a symbol. Not every colour has a message. Not every object placed or shaped in an unusual way proves a fully modern imagination. Stones break, bones crack. Pigments can be used for the body, for hides, for practical surfaces, for reasons we may never know. Time can move things together that were not originally together. So when we speak about early marks and pigments, we should not pretend that we can read them as easily as writing. They are not letters left for us. They are fragments of attention, and that is why they matter. The question is not whether every ancient mark has a clear meaning. The question is why, at some point, some humans began to make marks that seem to outlast the action that made them. A cut made by a tool for food disappears into use. A track in mud fades with weather, but a deliberate line on a hard surface may remain after the hand is gone. A patch of red ochre may stain skin, stone, or shell. A repeated pattern may invite another eye to notice it. This is where the story begins to shift from changing the world for immediate use to changing the world so that attention itself can be shared. A tool changes what the hand can do. Fire changes what the group can endure. A mark may change what a mind can hold outside itself. This does not mean the maker was saying, "I am different from animals." That would be too direct, too modern, and too impossible to prove. But when a human hand leaves a mark that others can see, the inner world has taken a small step outward. Something noticed inside one body has been placed into a material form that can remain in the world. Other animals make traces too. They build nests, leave scent, dig, scratch, shape environments, create paths, and affect the world in complex ways. We must keep remembering this, because the human story grows from animal life, not from emptiness. Yet symbolic marks, if they are truly symbolic, do something different from a nest or a trail. They may not only solve an immediate bodily problem. They may point, repeat, represent, decorate, identify, remember, or gather attention around a meaning that is not fully visible in the object itself. A shell with a hole may be useful, but it may also be worn. Pigment may protect skin or treat a surface, but it may also signal, mark, or beautify. A line may be a cut, but repeated lines may become pattern. And pattern is one of the quiet ways the mind begins to meet itself. It shows that attention is not only passing through the world, it is organizing the world. Still, we need to move slowly. We cannot look at an ancient mark and immediately say what it meant to the person who made it. It may have meant belonging. It may have meant memory. It may have meant nothing we would recognize. It may have been made in play, practice, habit, instruction, care, imitation, or a moment of focused movement. The power of these traces is not that they answer everything. Their power is that they show a new possibility. A thought, feeling, recognition, or pattern could remain outside the body long enough for another person to encounter it. That possibility belongs directly to the title of this video. Humans may have begun to feel different from other animals when they increasingly lived among things that carried human attention back to them. A shaped stone showed skill. A guarded fire showed care. A dead body showed the gap between flesh and remembered life. A mark showed that the mind could leave something less practical, more inward, more open to being seen. The mark did not have to speak. It only had to remain. Someone could return to it. Someone else could notice it. A child could see a pattern made before they were born. A group could gather around a color, a wall, a shell, a carved surface, or a repeated shape and feel that the world contained traces of their own attention. In that quiet returning, the human mind may have begun to feel a new kind of distance from ordinary animal life. Not because animals were meaningless, but because humans were beginning to place meaning where meaning did not need to be for survival alone. The rock did not ask to be marked. The shell did not ask to be worn. The wall did not ask to hold a shape. But the hand marked, shaped, stained, carried, and returned. And once attention can remain outside the body, the mind no longer lives only in breath, hunger, fear, and memory. It begins to live in traces that others can see. That is not yet writing. It is not yet history. It is not yet a clear answer. But it is one of the deepest changes in the story. The world was becoming a place where inner life could leave a visible shadow. A symbol is not powerful because it is large. It can be very small. A pierced shell, a stained surface, a repeated line, a piece of ochre carried from one place to another, a mark made where the hand did not need to cut. Its power comes from the fact that it may stand for more than itself. A shell is still a shell, but when it is chosen, altered, carried, worn, or kept, it may begin to hold attention in a different way. It may say something without language, though we must be very careful with the word say. It may mark a body, a bond, a group, a memory, a season, a skill, a place, or simply a habit of noticing beauty and pattern. We cannot know with certainty what many early objects meant to the people who used them. We should not pretend that a red mark always meant blood, that a shell always meant identity, that a pattern always meant ritual, or that a decorated object always meant belief. Those are modern readings placed onto ancient silence. But even without knowing the exact meaning, we can see why such objects matter to the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals. They suggest that some humans were no longer only using the world for survival in the most direct sense. They were beginning, in some places and times, to arrange parts of the world so that attention, recognition, and possibly shared meaning could remain. A tool helps the hand act. A symbol, if it is truly a symbol, helps the mind return. It makes a thing more than useful. It makes it noticeable in a human way. This is a quiet but enormous change. Imagine a small object carried not because it cuts better, burns longer, or feeds the body, but because it has become connected to someone, somewhere, or something remembered. The object may be light enough to hold in the hand, but heavy with attention. It may be shown, worn, hidden, traded, copied, or placed somewhere meaningful. It may help one person recognize another, or help a group recognize itself. Again, none of this should be pushed too far. We do not need to invent a full story around each ancient object. The truthful point is simpler. When humans began to live with objects that could carry meaning beyond immediate use, they were living in a world where the visible and invisible were becoming more closely tied. The object was visible. The meaning, if there was one, was not fully visible. It had to be learned, remembered, shared, or felt. That is directly connected to the title of this video, because feeling different from other animals may have required this kind of learned meaning. Other animals can recognize signs in the environment. They know calls, smells, tracks, posture, rank, danger, and familiarity. They can respond to signals with great intelligence. But a symbolic object does something more layered. It may ask the mind to treat a thing as both itself and not only itself. A mark is a mark, but it may also be a memory. A color is a color, but it may also be a signal. A shell is a shell, but it may also be a sign of belonging. A pattern is a pattern, but it may also be a way of holding attention together. This double life of things may have changed the human mind slowly. Once a group learns that an object can stand for more than its material use, the world becomes deeper. A wall is not only a wall, it may hold traces of hands. A body is not only skin, it may be marked, painted, adorned, recognized. A place is not only shelter, it may be remembered because something was placed or drawn there. A thing found far away is not only stone or shell, it may carry the distance of travel, exchange, memory, or choice. The human world begins to fill with objects that ask to be interpreted. And to Marn, this does not mean early humans sat apart from animals in pride or certainty. They still lived in bodies that needed warmth, food, sleep, touch, safety, and companionship. They still feared predators, storms, cold, injury, and hunger. But around those old animal needs, another layer was forming. A layer of signs, marks, colours, remembered objects, and shared attention. That layer may have made humans feel, not suddenly but gradually, that their lives contained meanings not visible to every creature passing through the same landscape. A deer might move past a marked stone without changing its path. A human child might pause because older members had paused there before. An animal might see a shell as a small, hard object. A human might see it as something worn by a certain person, carried from a distant shore, or kept because it mattered. This difference should not be turned into superiority. It is better understood as a change in relationship. Humans were beginning to relate to the world not only through need, but through remembered meaning. And remembered meaning changes the self. A person wearing, making, or recognizing a sign may begin to feel that they belong in a way that can be seen. They may begin to know that others can notice them not only by face, smell, voice, or movement, but by the things they carry and the marks they share. The body becomes a surface of meaning. The object becomes a keeper of attention. The group becomes a place where certain signs are understood and others are not. This may be one of the quieter roots of human difference, the ability to live inside a world where meaning has to be learned from others. A child does not understand a symbol alone. They learn it by watching where adults look, what they touch, what they keep, what they avoid, what they repeat. In this way, symbols tie inner life to social life. A mark made by one hand becomes meaningful only if another mind can meet it. A colour on skin matters more if others see it. A shaped object carries more weight if the group knows how to respond to it. Meaning is not sealed inside the object. It lives between people. And because it lives between people, it can outlast a single moment, a single body, and sometimes even a single generation. Here we can feel how this part of the story connects back to death, care, fear, hunger, tools, and fire. All of those earlier layers taught humans to live beyond the immediate present. Symbols may have given that extended life a visible form. They allowed attention to settle into things. They allowed memory to gather around marks. They allowed belonging, difference, beauty, warning, or identity to be held outside the body. Still, we should leave the meaning open. The deep past does not give us enough evidence to translate every mark. What we can say, honestly, is that when humans began to make and keep objects that seemed to carry attention beyond use, they were entering a world where the mind could meet itself in material traces. That may have made the feeling of difference stronger, not because humans were no longer animals, but because these animals were beginning to surround themselves with visible signs of invisible life. Once a mark can remain outside the body, the mind has a new kind of mirror, not a mirror of polished glass, and not a mirror that shows a face clearly, but a quieter mirror, a surface where attention has stayed. A hand makes a line, and later the line is still there. A body wears a shell, and others see not only the body, but the chosen thing carried with it. A colour-stained skin, stone, hide, or bone, and the world no longer looks exactly as it did before the human hand touched it. This is not yet writing. It is not yet a clear story. It is not yet proof that early humans thought about themselves in the way we do. But it may be one of the places where inner distance began to grow. The person who makes a mark can return to it. The child who sees it can learn that someone made it before. The group that recognizes it can treat it as more than a scratch. And in that returning, learning, and recognizing, the human mind begins to meet its own activity outside itself. This matters directly to the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals, because feeling different may not have begun with looking at animals and feeling superior to them. It may have begun with humans looking at a changed surface, a carried object, a marked body, or a remembered place, and sensing, however faintly, that their own attention had become part of the world. Other animals leave traces everywhere: a nest, a track, a scent mark, a worn path, a den, a broken branch, a shell opened by a stone. These are real changes made by living creatures. The human line did not invent the act of altering the environment, but symbolic or near-symbolic traces, if that is what some of these marks and objects were, created a different kind of return. A track says that a body passed. A tool says that a hand worked. A mark that seems to carry pattern or attention may say something more uncertain and more inward. Someone noticed. Someone chose. Someone repeated. Someone wanted this to remain. We cannot translate it, and we should not pretend that we can. Yet even without translation, the act itself suggests a mind living with a new relationship to its own experience. The feeling, the memory, the bond, the attention, or the pattern did not have to disappear when the body moved away. It could be placed, faintly and imperfectly, into matter. That is a profound change. Because once meaning can be placed outside the body, it can be shared without the original feeling still being present. A person may no longer feel the same fear, but a warning mark or remembered place can bring caution back. A person may no longer be beside the maker, but an object can carry the maker's skill. A group may no longer remember exactly why a place mattered at first, but the place can still gather attention because marks, colours, remains, or repeated visits made it different from other places. This is how the visible world begins to hold invisible life. It does not hold it perfectly. It does not explain itself. It leaves room for forgetting, misunderstanding, imitation, and change. But it gives human memory something to lean on. It gives the group something to return to. And it gives the self a strange new possibility to see that what happens inside can leave a shape outside. From there, the feeling of being different could deepen in a very quiet way. A person might mark a surface and later see that the mark is still present when the feeling has changed. They might see a younger person copying an older pattern. They might notice that certain objects are treated with care, not because they are sharp or warm or edible, but because people have learned to respond to them. They might feel that the group recognizes something invisible through something visible. This is not philosophy, but it is the ground from which reflection can grow. To live among symbols, even simple and uncertain ones, is to live among reminders that the world is not only what the body needs right now, it is also what the mind has noticed, chosen, repeated, and taught. A shell can become a sign of belonging. A red stain can become part of a body's social appearance. A line can become a pattern that outlives the gesture. A place can become different because people return to it with attention. None of these things proves the exact moment when humans felt unlike other animals, but together they show the question becoming more visible. The human world was filling with traces of human attention. The mind was no longer held only in memory, gesture, fear, hunger, care, or grief. It was beginning to settle into things. And when inner life settles into things, a person can begin to experience a small distance from their own experience. They can see what a hand has done after the hand has stopped. They can see what a group remembers after the event has passed. They can see that a body can carry signs, that a place can hold memory, that an object can mean more to one group than to another. This distance may be one of the foundations of self-awareness. Not a sudden awakening, not a clean separation from animals, but a slow discovery that life can be reflected back through marks, colours, objects, and shared signs. At the close of this part, the story has moved from bodies to tools, from tools to fire, from fire to groups, from groups to emotion, from emotion to death, and now from death to visible traces of invisible attention. The question has not been answered, and it should not be answered yet. But the ground has changed. Humans were not merely reacting to the world, they were increasingly leaving parts of their inner life in the world, where others could see, learn, remember, and respond. Once that became possible, another step waited nearby, the ability not only to mark the world, but to speak about it, to call attention to what was absent, to name what others could not see, and perhaps one day to say something like, I, even before any such word could be preserved for us. Language leaves almost no fossil of itself. A bone can remain. A stone tool can remain. A mark on a wall can remain. But a voice disappears the moment the air stops moving. This is why we must be very careful when we speak about early language. We cannot know the first words. We cannot place clear sentences into the mouths of people who left no recordings and no writing. We cannot say exactly when a sound became a name, when a gesture became a shared sign, or when a call became something more like speech. Yet language belongs directly to the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals, because language changes what a mind can share. Many animals communicate with calls, gestures, postures, facial expressions, scents, songs, and learned signals. Communication did not begin with humans. Warning did not begin with humans. Recognition did not begin with humans. But human language, as it gradually emerged, seems to have opened a deeper kind of shared attention. It allowed minds not only to react together to what was present, but to turn together toward what was absent. A sound or gesture could call attention to a person not there, a place beyond sight, a danger remembered, a tool needed later, a child who had wandered, a dead person no longer moving, or a season not yet arrived. This is a very quiet revolution. When a group can refer to what is not directly in front of the body, the world becomes larger than the senses. The eyes see the fire, but the mind can turn toward tomorrow's cold. The hand holds a stone, but the group can attend to an animal still beyond the hill. A child hears a sound, and learns that the sound does not only belong to the present moment, it can point elsewhere. We should not imagine early language as polished or complete. It may have included gesture, rhythm, facial movement, pointing, imitation, calls, repeated sounds, and slowly stabilized meanings. It may have grown unevenly across many groups and long stretches of time, but even simple shared signs could change inner life. A named thing can be carried when the thing itself is gone. A named person can be remembered when the body is absent. A named danger can be feared before it arrives. A named place can become part of the group's memory. And as more of life becomes speakable, or gesturable, or shareable in signs, the human mind begins to live among things that are present in thought, but absent from touch. This matters because feeling different from other animals may not have begun with one proud idea. It may have begun with the growing ability to hold the same invisible thing together. One person remembers a sound in the night, another understands the warning. One person points toward a path, another understands the place. One person makes a gesture for a tool, an animal, a child, a dead companion, or a coming danger, and the group's attention gathers around something no one is touching. In that gathering, the mind becomes less private. A feeling can be shared before it becomes action. A memory can move from one body into another. A plan can exist between people. A loss can be held by more than the one who first felt it. Language, even before it became complex speech, may have strengthened the bridge between inner experience and shared life. It did not remove humans from the animal world. It gave these animals a new way to carry the world inside one another. And perhaps, over time, this changed the feeling of being alive. A person could be called. A place could be recalled. A danger could be described. A child could be corrected before harm. A tool could be asked for. A dead person could remain in sound, gesture, or name. The body still needed food, warmth, rest, and safety. But the mind could travel farther than the body. It could move backward to what had happened, and forward to what might happen. It could enter the attention of others without moving from where it sat. Here we can see why language belongs after marks and symbols in this journey. A mark leaves attention in matter. A word, gesture, or name leaves attention in another mind. It is lighter than stone and more fragile than pigment, but it can travel quickly through a group. It can be repeated by a child. It can change a decision before the body acts. It can make absence almost present. Still, we must not close the question too soon. Early language did not automatically create modern self-awareness. A creature can communicate richly without asking what kind of creature it is, but language may have made that question easier to grow. It gave the mind a way to separate the feeling from the thing felt, the person from the name, the action from the memory of the action. Once something can be named, it can be recalled, shared, compared, corrected, and perhaps one day wondered about. The beginning of human difference may have deepened when humans could not only feel fear, but signal fear. Not only remember a place, but call others toward it. Not only lose a person, but keep that person present in a sound. Not only act, but have the action held in the group's attention. In such a world, life becomes surrounded by echoes. The body is here, but the name can be elsewhere. The event is over, but the telling can bring it back. The animal is gone, but the warning remains. The dead are silent, but the living may still call them in memory. That is not yet writing, and it is not yet the full reflective self. But it is a powerful step toward the strange human condition, living in a world where much of what matters is not visible, not touchable, and yet shared. A name is one of the lightest things a human group can carry, and one of the heaviest. It has no body, no weight in the hand, no edge like a tool, no warmth like fire, no colour like pigment on stone. Yet once a person can be called, remembered, warned, searched for, comforted, or missed through a sound or sign, that person begins to exist in a new way inside the group. The body may be behind a hill, inside a shelter, asleep near the fire, lost in the dark, or gone from life entirely, but the name can still bring attention back toward them. This does not mean early humans had names exactly as later cultures did, and we should not pretend to know what those names sounded like. They may have used sounds, gestures, calls, kin terms, marks of relation, or repeated ways of identifying one person from another. The exact form is lost, but the deeper change is easier to understand. When one member of a group can be singled out in the minds of others, even when absent, the person becomes more than the visible body in front of them. They become someone who can be held in shared attention. This belongs directly to the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals, because a creature that can be called may also begin, slowly, to feel itself as the one being called. A child hears a sound and learns that it means them. They turn. They come closer. They are stopped before danger. They are invited toward food. They are warned away from fire. They are searched for when missing. Over many repetitions, the sound or sign does not merely point from others toward the child. It also returns inward. It teaches the child, in a bodily and social way, that they occupy a place in other minds. Other animals recognize individuals and respond to calls, scents, faces, voices, and relationships. So again, there is no clean wall here. But in human life, naming may have become tied to longer memory, teaching, shared work, death, care, and story. To be called was not only to be located. It could mean being needed for a task, blamed for an action, comforted after pain, warned before danger, remembered after absence, or included in a shared plan. The name, or whatever early form of naming existed, became a small bridge between the living body and the social memory around it. It could carry expectation, it could carry trust, it could carry grief. It could carry a person beyond the moment when the eyes could see them. This may have changed the inner life of humans in a very quiet way. A person who hears others refer to them learns that they can be an object of attention. They can be spoken about, gestured toward, called back, corrected, praised, feared, missed, or remembered. The self does not have to begin as a private idea. It may begin as this repeated experience. Others know me, others call me, others expect me, others remember what I did. Once language gives that social memory a sound, the reflection becomes stronger. The group does not only react to the person's body, it can hold the person in signs. It can bring the person into attention when they are not there. It can preserve a trace of them after the action has ended. In this way, a name makes absence easier to carry. Someone can say or gesture toward the one who went to find water. Someone can call for the one who knows how to mend a hide. Someone can warn a child by referring to the person who was hurt in a certain place. Someone can remember the dead, not only by looking at an empty place, but by bringing their presence back through sound. We must remain careful, because the evidence cannot tell us exactly when this began. Language is not buried in the ground like bone. But from what we know about human social dependence, long childhood, and the importance of teaching, it is reasonable to see naming and reference as part of the widening human world. A group that can refer to particular people can organize care more precisely. It can remember responsibility more clearly. It can pass on knowledge with more focus. It can say, in whatever early form, not just danger, but danger near that place. Not just food, but food brought by that person. Not just child, but this child. Not just absence, but the one who is missing. This is a different kind of shared reality. The world becomes filled not only with things, but with relations between things, people, memories, and expectations. A person becomes tied to past actions and future needs through the way others refer to them. And when a person is held in that web of reference, their own sense of life may slowly become more layered. They may feel hunger, but also know that others expect them to share. They may feel fear, but also know that others are watching whether they run, warn, or remain. They may feel skill in the hands, but also know that younger eyes seek them out. They may feel grief, but also hear the absent person brought back through a sound. Naming does not create the self alone, but it gives the self a shape that can travel between minds. It allows a person to be present in conversation, gesture, memory, and expectation when the body is elsewhere. That is one of the quiet powers behind human difference. The body remains animal, vulnerable, hungry, tired, warm, frightened, and mortal. But the named or recognized person begins to live in another layer, one made of shared signs. This layer can comfort, because the group can call you back. It can burden, because the group can remember what you did. It can protect, because others can search for you. It can wound, because others can turn your name or sign into blame. It can preserve, because after death, something of your presence may remain in the mouths, gestures, and memories of the living. Perhaps this is one reason the word I, whenever something like it eventually emerged, carried such importance. To say I is not only to make a sound, it is to gather the body, memory, action, and social reflection into one point of attention. We should not imagine the first I as a single dramatic moment. More likely, the path toward it was long and uneven, passing through calls, gestures, names, kinship, pointing, warning, asking, refusing, remembering, and being remembered. But the direction matters. A creature that can be called by others may someday learn to refer to itself. A creature that can be remembered by others may someday remember itself as the one who acted. A creature whose inner states can be named may someday notice those states more clearly. Fear becomes not only fear, but my fear. Hunger becomes not only hunger, but my hunger. A wound becomes not only pain, but my pain, seen by others and carried in memory. Loss becomes not only absence, but someone I lost. Here the human mind moves closer to the feeling described in the hook, not merely feeling, but noticing the feeling as one's own. Still, the question remains open. Naming does not prove the exact moment humans felt different from animals. It only shows another condition that made that feeling more likely. Once people could be called, remembered, and held in shared signs, the self had a stronger place to gather. It could gather in the body, in the eyes of others, in tools and actions, in grief and care, and now in sound. And from that gathering, the mind could begin to turn toward itself, slowly, gently, without yet knowing where that turning would lead. To say I is not only to make a sound for oneself, it is to gather many layers of life into one small point. This body, this hunger, this fear, this memory, this action, this place among others. We do not know when anything like the word I first existed, and we should not imagine one sudden evening when a human being discovered the self and spoke it clearly into the air. Language grows too slowly for that kind of scene. The path toward I was probably made from humbler things. Being called by others, reaching and being stopped, feeling pain and being comforted, making a tool and being watched, losing someone and remembering them, hearing signs that referred to places, dangers, people and needs not present to the eye. Long before a person could explain the self, they may have lived through the repeated experience of being treated as a particular someone. The group called, expected, corrected, followed, warned, blamed, trusted, and remembered. Over time, those reflections could gather inside the mind. A person might begin to feel not only hunger, but hunger that belonged to this body. Not only fear, but fear that others could see in this face. Not only action, but action that could be remembered by the group. This is why language matters so deeply to the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals. It did not create the body, or emotion, or memory, or social life from nothing. It gave them a form that could be shared, repeated, separated, and turned back toward the one who experienced them. A feeling without a name can still be powerful, but a feeling that can be signaled, answered, recalled, and compared becomes easier to notice. Fear can be warned about, hunger can be asked for, pain can draw help, loss can be carried in sound, a remembered place can be brought into the present, a person can be called back from the edge of danger before the danger is visible. In all of this, language allows the mind to stand a little beside experience, not outside it completely, not above it, but beside it enough to hold it, share it, and sometimes delay the action it would otherwise produce. A creature can be afraid and flee, but a creature that can signal fear, hear fear named or shown, remember past fear, and understand the fear of others, is living inside a thicker world. A creature can want food and eat, but a creature that can request, refuse, divide, promise, remember, or complain is living with desire in a social shape. A creature can act, but a creature whose action can be referred to later may begin to feel the action as part of a continuing self. Still, we must keep the boundary soft. Other animals communicate, remember, recognize individuals, respond to signals, and live in meaningful social worlds of their own. The human difference is not that animals are silent machines and humans alone have inner life. That is not true, and it would weaken the honesty of this story. The difference seems to be that, in the human line, communication became increasingly able to carry absent things, shared memories, plans, relationships, and eventually the speaker themselves. Once a person can be referred to by others, the person can become an object of thought. Once a person can refer to their own action, the action can be held apart from the body that performed it. Once a person can signal an inner state, the state can be recognized as something that can be shared and perhaps changed. This may be one of the roots of human self-awareness, the mind learning to treat its own life as something that can be brought into attention. The first I, in whatever form it eventually took, may have been less like a philosophical discovery and more like a gathering place. Around it came the body's needs, the group's memory, the name or sign others used, the pain that was seen, the fear that was shared, the tool made by these hands, the child cared for by this person, the dead remembered by this voice. To say or feel I is to hold together what might otherwise scatter. It is to know, even faintly, that experiences are happening to someone, and that this someone can be known by others. That knowledge may have changed the feeling of being alive. The world was no longer only outside the body, pressing inward through hunger, cold, danger, and touch. The world could be spoken, gestured, recalled, and shared. The self was no longer only a body reacting. It was becoming a point where memories, names, expectations, and feelings crossed. This does not mean early humans looked at other animals and declared themselves separate. The deeper change may have been much quieter. A human could hear a warning and think of danger not yet seen. A human could hear a name and think of someone not present. A human could remember a dead person through sound. A human could feel fear and know that others knew. A human could act, then later hear that action brought back into the group's attention. In this repeated turning, the mind began to live with echoes of itself, and echoes can create distance. The feeling is here, but it can also be signaled. The action is over, but it can also be remembered. The person is absent, but they can also be called. The body is living now, but it can also be imagined as gone. This distance is not cold or separate. It is the space in which reflection becomes possible. At the close of this part of the journey, language has not given us a date or a final answer. It has given us a stronger sense of how the question changed. Humans may have begun to feel different from other animals when they could increasingly share what was not visible, name what was absent, hold one another in signs, and slowly turn those signs back toward themselves. The voice disappeared into air, but what it carried could remain in another mind. A word could be lighter than a bone, and still last longer in memory than a footprint in dust. Once that became possible, human life entered an invisible world that could move from person to person. And that invisible world is where the next part of the story must go, into memory, prediction, old places, lost people, future seasons, and the quiet human habit of carrying more inside the mind than the eyes can see. There comes a point in the human story when the world directly before the eyes is no longer the only world being lived in. The fire is here, the stones are here, the cold wind is here, the sleeping child is here, the dark shape of the land is here. But inside the mind, there are also other places. A river crossed in another season, a shelter that was safe before, a tree that once held fruit, a path where danger came suddenly, a face no longer beside the fire, a sound heard in childhood, a hunger remembered from a hard winter, a warning passed down from someone older. This invisible world does not float above the real world. It grows from it. It is made of remembered bodies, remembered places, remembered pain, remembered food, remembered loss, remembered success, remembered mistakes. Many animals remember, and many animals use memory in powerful ways. They return to water, migrate across distance, recognize companions, avoid danger, store food, follow routes, and learn from experience. So memory itself is not the dividing line. But in humans, memory appears to have become increasingly woven together with tools, fire, language, teaching, symbols, death, and social expectation. That weaving may have changed what it felt like to be alive. A human did not simply remember because memory helped the body survive. A human group could begin to live inside shared memory, where one person's past could become another person's guidance. A child could fear a place because an elder remembered danger there. A young hand could shape stone according to a pattern learned from someone now absent. A group could return to a shelter not only because it was visible, but because it had been held in memory across distance. A person could feel loss not only when seeing the dead body, but later when a familiar task was left undone. This matters deeply for the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals, because a mind filled with shared memory is no longer living only in the present landscape. It is living in a landscape thickened by what has happened before. A rock overhang is not only stone, It is the place where rain was survived. A bend in the river is not only water. It is where food was once found, where someone slipped, where a child was born, where a predator passed, where the group waited through cold. A tool is not only an object, it is the memory of hands that knew how to make it. A fire circle is not only ashes, it is warmth remembered, voices remembered, fear held back for a night, faces once seen in light. The human world becomes layered. What the eyes see and what the mind remembers begin to occupy the same space. In such a world, feeling different from other animals may have begun not as a proud comparison, but as a quiet burden. Humans carried too much inside them for the present moment to remain simple. The animal body still wanted food now, warmth now, safety now, rest now, but the human mind, growing inside a social and remembering life, could be pulled backward by what had happened and forward by what might happen again. A person might avoid a place not because danger was visible, but because danger had once been there. A person might save food not because hunger was present, but because hunger had once returned. A person might teach a child not because the child was in danger now, but because danger would someday come when the teacher was not there. This is one of the quietest forms of inner distance. The mind begins to treat the absent past as if it still has weight. It begins to let yesterday enter the movement of today. It begins to act under the influence of people, seasons, wounds, and places that are no longer directly present. Other animals do this in many ways too, and we should keep that truth close. But in humans, the remembered world became increasingly shareable. A memory could become a warning could become a habit could become tradition, a tradition could remain after the first memory had faded. This is where the invisible world becomes larger than any one mind. It is not only what I remember, it is what we remember, what we were taught to notice, what we fear because others feared it before us, what we return to because others returned before us, what we carry because others learned its value. At this point in the journey, the human difference becomes less about one ability and more about accumulation. The body carried, the hand shaped, the group remembered, the voice pointed beyond the present, the mark held attention, the dead remained in memory. All of these together made it possible for humans to live inside a world that was partly visible and partly carried within. And perhaps that is one of the first clear shapes of feeling different, not knowing oneself as separate from animals, but feeling life as something filled with invisible continuities, where what is gone still guides, what is absent still matters, what has not yet arrived can already change the hand, the step, and the heart. To remember the past is already to live beyond the present, but to imagine what has not yet happened may be an even stranger burden. The animal body is built to answer what presses on it now. Cold on the skin, hunger in the belly, sound in the dark, movement in the grass, pain in the foot, a child crying nearby. But a human mind, shaped by memory, group life, tools, fire, language, and teaching, could begin to feel the weight of things that had not yet arrived. The cold before winter, the hunger before the food was gone, the danger before the predator appeared, the loss before the loved body stopped moving. This does not mean early humans saw the future clearly, or made plans in the modern sense, or sat apart from the group thinking in abstract timelines. It means something more grounded and more believable. They may have learned, through repeated seasons and remembered hardship, that tomorrow could enter today. A group that had lived through hunger once might behave differently when food was still present. A person who had seen a child wander too far might watch more closely before the next danger. Someone who remembered a dry season might lead others toward water before thirst became desperate. Someone who knew how quickly fire could die might gather fuel before darkness fell. In these small acts, the future was not an idea written on a calendar. It was a pressure felt in the hand, the stomach, the eyes, and the group's movement. This matters directly to the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals, because the future is invisible, and yet human life became increasingly shaped by it. Many animals anticipate. They migrate, store food, prepare nests, respond to seasonal changes, and behave in ways that show complex sensitivity to what is coming. So prediction itself is not purely human, but in humans, anticipation became joined to shared memory and teaching. One person's remembered winter could become a child's caution. One person's mistake could become a group habit. One danger survived by the old could become a warning for the young. The future, then, was not only sensed by instinct or repeated environment. It could be carried socially. It could be passed through gesture, practice, warning, story, place, and attention. A child could be taught to fear a river before falling into it. A young maker could learn to prepare a tool before the hunt. A group could move before the season fully changed because memory had made the change visible before the eyes could see it. In this way, the human mind began to live under the influence of things absent in another direction. Not only the past that had disappeared, but the future that had not yet arrived. That double absence may have changed the feeling of being alive. The present was no longer a simple surface. It had shadows behind it and shadows ahead of it. A full stomach could contain the memory of hunger and the fear of future hunger. A warm fire could contain the memory of cold and the need to guard embers for later. A child playing near the edge of camp could contain the memory of another child lost, the imagined danger ahead, and the urgent care of those watching. A clear sky could contain the memory of storms. A quiet landscape could contain the possibility of threat. Such a mind is not outside animal life. It is deeply inside animal life, but it is carrying animal life across time with unusual intensity. The body still lives in the present, but the mind pulls the present open. It asks, without needing words, what if this returns? What if this disappears? What if this child must one day know what I know? What if the group is not ready? These are not modern questions in formal language. They are practical tensions that could live in repeated behavior. Saving, teaching, waiting, warning, returning, repairing, watching, refusing to use everything at once. All of these are ways the future enters the body before it becomes thought. And once humans began to live this way, the difference between desire and responsibility became stronger. The body might want to eat all the food now. Memory says hunger may come again. The body might want to sleep. The fire says someone must watch. The body might want to move quickly. The injured person says the group must slow. The child might want to explore. The remembered danger says someone must call them back. Here the human mind becomes a place where times meet, now, before, and later begin to press against one another. This may be one of the quiet foundations of the feeling described in the title. Humans beginning to feel different from other animals, not because they escaped instinct, but because they increasingly had to live with instinct, memory, and anticipation at the same time. That is a difficult kind of life. It gives power, but it also gives worry. It allows preparation, but it also allows fear of what is not here. It allows teaching, but it also makes adults responsible for dangers the young have not yet known. It allows care to extend beyond the visible moment. A parent or elder can prepare a child for a world the child has not yet met. A group can carry knowledge for people not yet born. A tool can be shaped for a task not yet begun. A place can be avoided because of harm that might return. In all of this, the invisible world grows heavier. Humans were not only remembering what had happened, they were beginning to be guided by what might happen. And perhaps this is where the feeling of difference became more inward. An animal can suffer hunger. A human can suffer hunger before the hunger comes, because memory has made the future emotionally real. An animal can flee danger. A human can lie awake near the fire because danger might come, because others are sleeping, because the child must be protected, because the last cold season is still living inside the mind. This does not make humans higher than other animals. It makes human awareness more burdened by time. At the close of this part, we can see the invisible world widening. The past does not merely remain behind. The future does not merely wait ahead. Both enter the present and change it. A living person becomes a meeting place for old seasons. remembered deaths, taught skills, expected needs, and imagined dangers. The world before the eyes is still real, but it is no longer alone. Around it gathers a second world, the world of what has been and what may be. And once humans carried that second world strongly enough, they may have begun to sense that their lives were not only happening moment by moment, but unfolding across time, watched by others, remembered by others, and always moving toward what no one could fully see. The invisible world that humans carried was not separate from the real world. It was not fantasy floating above hunger, cold, stone, fire, skin, blood, and weather. It grew from all of them. A place became more than a place, because something had happened there. A path became more than a path because feet had survived it before. A tool became more than stone because hands had shaped it, used it, repaired it, copied it, and taught it. A face became more than a face because it belonged to someone expected, trusted, feared, loved, or missed. A season became more than a change in temperature because it carried the memory of hunger, migration, birth, sickness, safety, or loss. In this way, early humans may have begun to live in two worlds at once, the visible world that pressed against the body, and the remembered world that pressed against the mind. This is not a claim that no other animals remember, anticipate, or feel absence. Many do, and the honesty of this story depends on keeping that truth close. But in the human line, memory, expectation, language, tools, fire, care, death, and shared teaching seem to have gathered into a thicker inner life. The same landscape could hold more than one type. A river could be water now, danger from before, food in a certain season, a boundary for the young, a place where someone had died, and a path toward another group or another shelter. A fire could be warmth now, but also the memory of nights survived, the responsibility of keeping embers alive, the fear of losing heat before dawn, and the quiet center where names, warnings, gestures, and remembered faces pass between people. A child could be a small body needing food now, but also a future carrier of knowledge, a future mourner, a future maker, a future memory of those who taught them. This layering is important for the central question, because feeling different from other animals may have grown from carrying more reality than the senses alone could hold. The eyes saw one moment, but the mind held many. The hand touched one object, but the object carried past use and future need. The body stood in one place, but memory reached behind it, and expectation reached ahead. In such a life, the present was never empty. It was crowded with what had been learned, what had been lost, what might return, and what must be protected before it disappeared. This may be one of the quietest burdens of being human, not simply to suffer, but to remember suffering, not simply to need, but to expect need, not simply to love, but to know that what is loved can be absent, not simply to act, but to feel that the action may remain in the minds of others. A creature living this way begins to experience itself across time. It is not only the hungry body of this morning, it is also the body that was hungry before, the body that may be hungry again, the body others depend on, the body that remembers who fed it, who hurt it, who stayed, who vanished. The self becomes less like a single point and more like a thread. It ties yesterday to today to tomorrow, one person to another, one place to another, one loss to a later silence, one lesson to a child's future hand. This does not mean early humans had a modern autobiographical self in the way people describe their lives now. We cannot make that claim. The deep past gives us no diary, no preserved voice, no direct report from inside the mind. But it is reasonable to say that the conditions for a more continuous self were being built. A mind that remembers its own actions, hears others refer to them, sees traces of its work, returns to meaningful places, carries the dead in memory, and prepares for needs not yet present, is a mind living with continuity. It begins to feel that life is not a series of disconnected reactions, It begins to feel that there is a before and after around the one who experiences them. This continuity may have made humans feel different in a way both powerful and uneasy. To live only in the immediate present would be lighter in some ways. To live across time is to gain foresight, learning, loyalty, and care, but also worry, regret, longing, and the ache of things that cannot be returned. A remembered mistake can trouble the body after danger has passed. A future hunger can darken a day when food is still present. A dead person can remain near even when the place beside the fire is empty. A child's future can matter before the child understands danger. The invisible world gives human beings depth, but it also gives them weight. Perhaps this is why the human difference should not be described as a simple victory over animal life. It may be more honest to describe it as animal life becoming aware of its own depth. Humans did not stop being creatures of breath, warmth, instinct, sleep, fear, and need. They became creatures who could remember those needs, share them, name them, prepare for them, and sometimes wonder about them. They could feel the pull of a place where they were not standing. They could be guided by a person who was no longer alive. They could fear a season that had not yet arrived. They could change their behavior because of an event no one present had directly seen, but everyone had learned to remember. In this sense, the invisible world was not unreal. It was one of the most practical things humans had. It helped them survive, teach, avoid danger, care for the young, hold groups together, and carry knowledge across generations. But it also opened the door to a deeper question. If so much of life happens in what cannot be seen, then what is a human being? Is a human only the body standing here, or also the memories others carry, the signs left behind, the words spoken, the tools taught, the losses remembered, the futures imagined? Early humans may not have asked the question in that form, but their lives were already moving toward it. At the close of this part, the journey has reached the edge of its final turn. We have not found a single moment when humans began to feel different from other animals, and that is important. The evidence does not allow a simple answer. What we have found instead is a slow gathering. Body, hand, tool, fire, group, care, death, mark, language, memory, and future. Each layer made the world less immediate and the mind more aware of relation. Each layer made it easier for humans to live not only in what was happening, but in what had happened, what might happen, and what still mattered though absent. From here, the final question is no longer whether humans left the animal world. They did not. The deeper question is whether humans began to feel different at the very moment they became able to recognize themselves as animals who knew they were living, losing, remembering, and asking. The closer we come to the end of this question, the less honest it would be to offer one clean answer. There was probably no single morning when humans looked at other animals and suddenly felt separate from them. No one bone can carry that moment. No one tool can prove it. No one burial, mark, shell, hearth, or imagined first word can bear the whole weight. The beginning was slower than a discovery and quieter than a declaration. It was not a door closing behind the animal world. It was more like a long, widening inside animal life itself. A body stood more often on 2 feet, and the hands carried more. The hands shaped stone, kept useful things, touched others, and taught younger hands. Fire gathered bodies into shared warmth and shared responsibility. Groups remembered who could be trusted, who needed care, who knew paths, who had been lost. Fear became warning. Hunger became sharing and delay. Pain became visible to others. Death became the strange place where a familiar body remained, but the familiar person did not. Marks and colours placed attention into the world. Sounds, gestures, names, and eventually language allowed minds to gather around things not present to the eye. Memory and expectation filled the visible landscape with invisible weight. All of these changes did not lift humans out of nature. They drew humans deeper into a more complicated awareness of being alive. This is why the title's question must be handled with care. When did humans begin to feel different from other animals? Perhaps the answer is not found in the moment humans became powerful, but in the moment they became troubled by their own awareness. Other animals live, feel, remember, bond, fear, search, cooperate, and suffer. That truth should make us more humble, not less. The human difference, if we can speak of it carefully, may have grown when these old animal experiences became increasingly reflected back through memory, group life, symbols, and speech. Hunger was no longer only hunger, it could be remembered from last season and feared before it returned. Fear was no longer only fear, it could be shared, hidden, signaled, taught, or carried into a place where danger was not yet visible. Loss was no longer only the breaking of attachment, it could remain beside the fire, in a child's face, in a tool no longer used by the hand that made it, in the silence where someone's place had been. A choice was no longer only movement, it could be watched by others, remembered by others, and later felt as something one had done. In that slow accumulation, the mind may have begun to notice itself, not as a thing apart from the body, but as the body's life becoming aware of its own patterns. This does not mean early humans walked around with fully formed thoughts about identity, nature, or the meaning of existence. That would be too modern, and it would make the deep past less truthful. The first difference may have been far less clear. It may have been a pause before taking food because others were hungry. It may have been fear held still because a child would be endangered by sudden movement. It may have been returning to a place because someone remembered what happened there. It may have been touching a dead body and sensing that the body was both known and changed. It may have been seeing a mark made by a hand and recognizing that attention could remain after action ended. It may have been hearing a sound that called one person from the dark and realizing, in a bodily way, that a life could be held in the minds of others. These are small moments, but human difference may have been built from small moments repeated across immense time. The mistake would be to imagine that humans first felt different because they were above animals. A deeper possibility is that humans began to feel different when they could no longer simply be animals without knowing it. They were still hungry, still afraid, still warm-blooded, still vulnerable, still born helpless, still dependent on care, still destined to die. But they were becoming animals who could remember hunger before it came, fear death before it arrived, care for the weak beyond immediate gain, carry the absent inside the living, and leave traces of attention in the world. They were becoming animals who could sense that life was happening to them, not always clearly, not always peacefully, not always in words, but enough that the world began to turn back toward the mind and ask something of it. At this point, the question changes one final time. It is no longer only, when did humans feel different from other animals? It becomes, what kind of difference was it? Was it a difference of strength or a difference of burden? Was it a difference of control or a difference of responsibility? Was it the beginning of pride or the beginning of unease? The evidence cannot answer that in one simple sentence, but the long path suggests that the earliest human difference may not have been triumph. It may have been awareness carried inside an animal body, the awareness that others suffer, that the dead remain in memory, that children must be taught, that the future can hurt before it arrives, that a hand can change the world and then see the change still there. If that is true, then feeling different from other animals did not begin by leaving them behind. It began by noticing, slowly and imperfectly, what it meant to be one of them. To understand human difference honestly, we have to let go of the old picture in which humanity rises above the animal world like a creature stepping out of darkness into command. That picture may feel satisfying for a moment, but it is too simple for the evidence and too small for the truth. Humans did not come from somewhere outside life. We are not visitors placed on top of nature. We are bodies shaped by evolution, fed by the same earth, frightened by the same dangers, warmed by the same sun, dependent on the same breath, born through the same vulnerability that marks so many living things. The human mind, however unusual it became, did not erase the animal body beneath it. It grew from that body. It grew from hunger, touch, fear, attachment, play, pain, care, memory, and the need to stay close to others. This is why the question of when humans began to feel different from other animals should not lead us toward pride too quickly. It should lead us toward humility. If many animals remember, communicate, cooperate, grieve, learn, and care, then the human story is not a story of empty creatures below and a thinking creature above. It is a story of continuity, with one branch of life slowly becoming able to look back at the whole tree. The difference is real, but it is not a license to forget where it came from. A human hand can make a tool, but it is still a hand that needs warmth. A human voice can name the absent, but it is still a voice made of breath. A human mind can imagine the future, but it is still carried by a body that tires, sleeps, aches, and dies. Perhaps the deepest educational value in this question is that it teaches us to see human awareness as a responsibility rather than a crown. To notice fear is not only to fear more cleverly, it is to understand that fear lives in other creatures too. To remember loss is not only to make human grief special, it is to recognize that attachment is older than us, and that other living beings also move through bonds we are still learning to respect. To plan for the future is not only to control the world, it is to understand that our choices leave marks after the moment ends. The stone edge remains, the fire scar remains, the path remains, the story remains, the damage remains, the care remains. A species able to carry the past and imagine the future also becomes a species able to harm beyond immediate need or protect beyond immediate gain. That may be the serious side of human difference. We do not simply react. We can remember what reaction caused. We can look at a wounded landscape and know that hands were involved. We can look at another animal and know, or at least suspect, that its life is not empty. We can look at our children and understand that the world we leave will enter their bodies as weather, food, fear, safety, memory, and possibility. If early humans began to feel different when they noticed their own inner life, then modern humans carry the larger burden of noticing the inner life of others, not perfectly, not with full certainty, but enough to be careful. We cannot know exactly what a wolf feels, or an elephant, or a whale, or a bird calling across distance, but we know enough now to avoid treating them as mere objects in a human story. And we know enough about ourselves to see that intelligence without humility can become dangerous. The same mind that remembers the dead can forget the living if it grows proud. The same hand that cares for a child can destroy a habitat if it sees the world only as material. The same imagination that prepares for winter can build futures that other beings must suffer inside. So the question of human difference should not end by making humans larger and animals smaller. It should make the whole living world more serious in our eyes. We may be the animal that asks the question, but we are still part of the answer we are asking about. We are the animal that can feel hunger and think about hunger, feel fear and name fear, lose someone and carry the loss, make a mark and return to it, damage something and later understand that it was damaged. That is not a small gift. It is also not a simple comfort. It means that awareness asks something from us. If we can see ourselves as animals who know we are alive, then perhaps we can also learn to live less carelessly among the many animals who are alive with us. Maybe the most honest answer is that humans began to feel different from other animals, not when one ability appeared, but when many old animal abilities began to look back at themselves. Fear became something remembered. Hunger became something delayed. Care became something extended beyond the moment. Loss became something carried after the body was gone. Tools made intention visible in stone. Fire made attention gather through the night. Groups reflected each person back through trust, blame, need, and memory. Marks placed inner attention onto the surface of the world. Language made absent things present enough to share. Memory and expectation turned one life into a thread, stretched between what had happened and what might still come. None of these things alone gives us the beginning. Together, they show a direction. They show a creature still fully inside nature, but increasingly able to notice that it was inside nature. That may be the difference that matters most. Not escape, not superiority, not a clean wall between humans and the rest of life. A slower, stranger awareness. I am alive, others are alive. I can suffer, others can suffer. I can be remembered, I can lose. I can act now and leave consequences later. If this was the beginning, then the first human difference was not a victory cry. It may have been a pause, a hand stopping before it took all the food, a body staying near someone weak, a face turning toward a dead companion and not moving away at once, a child hearing a warning about a place not yet seen, an elder watching younger hands repeat an old skill. A group sitting near fire while darkness moved outside the ring of light, carrying in their minds things that were not there, the past, the missing, the feared, the hoped for, the remembered. In such moments, human life may have become more inward without becoming separate. The same body still needed sleep. The same skin still felt cold. The same stomach still tightened with hunger. The same heart still quickened at danger. But around those ancient needs, awareness slowly gathered. The living creature began to notice not only the world, but its own relation to the world. It could know a place because of what happened there. It could know a person by what they had done before. It could know a danger before it appeared. It could know grief after the body was gone. It could know that a mark remained after the hand had moved away. And perhaps, one day, in some form too old for us to recover, it could know itself as the one who felt, chose, feared, remembered, and waited. Yet even here, at the end, we should leave the question open. The deep past does not give us a final sentence. It gives us bones, stones, pigments, hearths, marks, bodies, patterns of care, and long silences. We can follow those traces, but we cannot make them speak more clearly than they can. We cannot hear the first person who felt watched by their own mind. We cannot know the first fear that became a remembered fear, the first grief that became a shared absence, the first sound that gathered a person into a name, the first moment when a human looked at another animal and sensed similarity and difference at the same time. What we can say is quieter. The feeling of being different probably grew slowly, unevenly, and without a single beginning. It grew from the same roots that tie us to other living beings. That is why the question remains so powerful. It is not asking when humans stopped being animals. We never did. It is asking when one animal began to carry enough memory, care, loss, language, imagination, and responsibility to wonder what kind of animal it was. And perhaps that wonder is still unfinished. Even now, when we ask when humans began to feel different from other animals, we are still doing the very thing the question describes. We are looking back through time, trying to understand the creature that learned to ask about itself. We are using memory, language, evidence, imagination, and caution to approach a silence that can never fully answer us. And maybe that is the final value of the question. It does not make us less animal. It reminds us how much animal life had to deepen before such a question could be asked at all. To feel different from other animals may not mean standing apart from them. It may mean standing within the same living world with a heavier kind of awareness, knowing that our thoughts, choices, harms, and kindnesses do not disappear when the moment passes. If we are the animal that can ask what makes us different, then perhaps we are also the animal that must ask what that difference is for. Not to dominate the world more completely, not to forget the creatures beside us, not to turn awareness into pride, but to live with more care, because we know that life is fragile, memory is powerful, and every living body is moving through a world it did not choose alone. So when did humans begin to feel different from other animals? Was it when they made tools, kept fire, buried the dead, marked stone, spoke names, remembered loss, imagined tomorrow, or finally noticed their own thoughts moving inside them? Or was it not one of these moments at all, but the long, unfinished moment in which an animal slowly became aware enough to ask why it felt different?